On record.
All right, call to order this evening the Lincoln City City Council meeting of Monday, January 13th, 2020. Roll call, please.
Dick Anderson.
Here.
Judy Casper.
Here.
Deanna Hinton.
Here.
Excuse me, Riley Hoagland.
Here.
Diane Coos.
Here.
Rick Mark.
Here.
And Mitch Parsons.
Here.
Great. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Normally, this is where I would apologize to the council and the audience. The NCAA has not returned my calls to delay the national football game tonight. So, you know, I'm sorry. Hopefully, you've taped it. I don't want to hear anything about it in tonight's business meeting, so don't go shouting any scores. But for some reason, I haven't seen one in so long because it's always the second Monday of January and we meet at the same time. So my apologies. We have at this point, there's been a request to change, adjust the agenda, and that would be to bring, we have a couple of interviews for Budget Committee and Planning Commission. So under L10 and L11, bring that over earlier. I think they want to go see the football game, is their real rationale. Not that they're not interested in all this other subject matter. So I wonder if we could move them right after D, between D and E, if that would be all right. Approve the minutes and then, and before deliberation. If we could do that. The other on adjustment, if you look over on public hearing ordinance H, the H6, the transitional housing has been withdrawn by the planning director, and so there is no need, we'll just cancel the public hearing on that item. So that will go away. So we'll try to get you out earlier. So with that, I would move us to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is the minutes of the regular meeting October 28th, 2019. And number 2 is minutes of a special meeting November 4th, 2019. And number 3 is minutes of a regular meeting November 25th, 2019.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I did forward a couple of small corrections to Kathy, so I'd like to move to approve the consent agenda for those 3 minutes that you mentioned with small corrections.
All right.
Second.
We have a motion to approve all 3 meeting minutes with small corrections and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed with a nay? Hearing none, thank you. At this time, we're then switching to the interview. We have a planning commission position open, or 1 applicant, and typically planning commission applicants and budget committee applicants are interviewed publicly. Mr. Chandler, I'm wondering, is there not another planning commission applicant in the system? And
Kathy, I'll ask you to address that.
There is one. We just received the application about the time that we were creating the agenda. So, and we do have 2 openings and two applicants.
So I'm wondering, what I was just wondering to combine, rather than doing one and one each night, if we could just delay this one to the next council meeting?
We could. If
He's
Mr.
here.
You got a
So is Kim Blackerby? Oh, there. Would you mind, because they're same questions, you've got the questions, but, put both applicants together as we talk about the Planning Commission, if just had you at the next council meeting, and, because Kathy, we'll be done, you'll be done with your process, but for the next council meeting?
Miss-
Okay.
But Mr. Mayor, if I understand the dates of the applicants and the dates of the openings, and then they came in succession, I don't know, he's here, I don't know. I hate asking people to come back.
Well, that's why I asked him. If it was, we're talking about in Lincoln City, so it's not like he's commuting, are you? So, yeah, I know. So I think it'd be helpful, hear both. I appreciate, time, if you don't mind, if council doesn't mind, and if our applicant, okay, so registered.
Yeah, I'd rather do it tonight as well. I mean, it's here. I mean, I understand, but I'm also of that. Just might as well.
I concur with them.
Just
Just do it tonight, yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
then, come on up. If you don't mind, we'll go to work. This is
Did not ask for a delay for the king.
for the game. I hear you.
It was not me.
Delay of game. Well, as I've indicated, what we do, this is we have 2 vacant seats on Planning Commission, is that correct? And so we've marketed, asked for citizens to volunteer and come forth. We have a couple in the works. And so what we'd be doing is, we've got some questions for you, and just, if you'd respond back to us, it'd be
Happy to.
great. Why don't you start with telling us who you are and why the Planning Commission?
Okay. My name is Kim Blackerby, and quite commonly mispronounced as Blackberry, but become used to that, and if you happen to use that, I'll accept it. I've been pretty intrigued since I moved to Lincoln City in 2017 with getting involved in some part of the city. I retired, but I need to stay busy, and I need to continue to use my mind, and so I've explored a number of just different opportunities for volunteerism and things like that, and the Planning Commission really intrigued me based on my background. I spent almost 40 years in corporate human resources with major corporations, and I felt the Planning Commission gets to touch virtually every aspect of the city. And with my experience with corporate strategic planning, policy administration, negotiations and things like that, that's where my services would best fit, and where I could pay back to the city with my services.
Thank you. Counselor, would you take next question? And
You bet. What are the top 3 planning issues facing Lincoln City?
I know there's more than 3 for sure. I reviewed the 2019 summary and the 2020 work of the Planning Commission, or the Planning Department, prepared by Anne Marie Skinner, and all blend together. So there's none that are really they intertwine with each other. But what I picked out was development, the long-range development, public development, and urban renewal activities, which you just were talking about. And then combined land use and zoning together, the what, the where, the when, and the who of land use and zoning. And then housing and where affordable housing comes into play, the design of housing, and housing images, what we want, what you want for the city.
Great, thank you.
sure.
What should the role of the public be in the planning decisions?
Well, I think the public should always be aware of what's going on. They should have access to the information, and they have the opportunity to express their opinions, with the final decision being the elected and appointed officials of the city.
Thank you.
How should the Planning Commission balance individual owners' interests with community interests?
Well, just like just about anything else in the world, the individuals want everything their way, right? And I had a considerable experience with that as I was an executive in the human resources function for over 17 years. And our organization had over 3,500 employees, and every employee wanted the things to be their way, right? But, you know, their interests, individual interests, should be listened to. I spent a lot of time listening to individual interests. But the community as a whole should be the primary objective. And you take the individual interest into consideration. It happens everywhere. It happens whether is the city more important than the state rules. So you have to take the things into considerations, but for the good of the whole is what should rule, in my opinion.
Okay. What should be the role of the Planning Commission in creating a look or image for the city?
I think because it is a volunteer organization, just like many other voluntary, the Sustainability Committee, the Budget Committees, those various other committees serve as consultants, liaisons, and in conjunction with them, and support the city manager, the city council, and all the other departments in terms of the ultimate image desired by the city, whether it be Explore Lincoln City or anybody else like that.
Our next question is, how should the city balance housing affordability with regulations?
I think regulations and ordinances should always be reviewed so we can ensure that there is availability of housing for employees to fill the businesses, to support the businesses in town, and help maintain the economic viability of the city. So you got to have housing availability, but it's got to be of the right type and nature to create the image that you want.
Thank you for your application and willingness to try something new.
Thank you, Councilor.
Yeah, it's exciting. What is the role of the Planning Commission when a person has a good idea, but the city's regulation prohibits it, or vice versa? Bad idea, but it allows it.
Run? No. Again, you got to provide advice and consultation. And so if there's somebody who has a great idea, but it doesn't fit with the regulations, then whether it be the Planning Commission or any one of the other committees, it's up to them to propose a regulation to change it if it makes sense, or vice versa. So it's kind of the way life works, right?
Thank you very much. Could you pronounce your last name again?
It's Black Irby.
Black Irby.
Black Irby.
Black Irby.
Looks like Black Irby, not
Yeah,
Blackberry. So
I'm always intrigued with the pronunciations of names as we get.
It is. It's been mispronounced most of my life. So.
I could bet, looking at it. Would you mind, or give us a brief, as you looked at Planning Commission and trying to get a better handle on what it does, and you mentioned some of the things, land use and ordinances and stuff. And do you distinguish anything different from a city council that deals with policies versus a planning commission?
If I understand what you're asking, right, is, again, we're advisors. We're not the final decision makers. We're here to serve at your pleasure.
Yeah, I guess where I'm getting, and you've touched on it a little bit, applicants usually come forward because they see city council and pay attention and want to deal with the policies that city makes. Mm-hmm. And Planning Commission is heavy, the land use aspect, and you touched on that. And so trying to keep those, and we who've served in Planning Commission, it takes years to learn it, especially in Oregon, and the impacts and what we're limited
Sure.
or forced to do. And I'm just wondering if that came abundantly clear to you as you were kind of looking at it, or do you still have a tendency to think, that planning is just another step towards city council? I mean, you're to pass policies, recommendations on policies to city council?
So I guess what I've been to the last few planning council meetings. I've been to a few prior council meetings. I've been to the urban renewal meeting. I think if I'm answering your question the way I understand it, it's an advice and consultation where none of those committees are here to make the regulation by any means.
And that's fine. I'm always concerned about what, that we put people in place and then they're disappointed because they, don't get the glory of council and making all those right decisions that we do.
No offense, but I did that for 40 years and I don't want to do that anymore.
No, that's great.
I'm anxious to serve and
I
recommend and be involved, and I love this community, but I don't have any other real higher aspirations at the moment.
No, yeah, and it's not the higher aspirations, it's, clarity in the job, and that, because it is, a planning commission is so different, and, I think some people just move into it and disappointed.
I was in the power game for so many years, and I don't want to be in it anymore.
Great. Other questions? Thank you, Kim, appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. And I'm not leaving to go see the game. So.
Okay. That's all right. Just don't call us back and tell us what the score is. Nope. We're in a position, we can either wait to deal on this after the next meeting, so we have 2 seats open. If you would want to deal with applicants and planning commission at the same time. So what's the pleasure of council?
Can we vote now?
We can, if that's your pleasure.
And then you would begin at the next meeting? Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to
then.
go ahead and make a recommendation and we can vote on it? Okay? Someone make a recommendation?
Sure, I'll do it. I move to appoint Kim Blackerby to the Planning Commission position that is the city resident urban growth boundary position for a term expiring 12/31/23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to do the appointment. And, yes, question.
I'm just noticing the recommendation on the agenda packet. Do we, if Mr. Blackerby is a city resident, I understand that it's a difference in the term, but is it possible that this other applicant is a UGB resident, not a city resident, and we would be excluded? I mean, is that the concern? The other is a
Both
city-
are city
both are
residents.
city residents. Then-
Yep. Great. Good question, though, because we'd want to leave one open for expanded if we could, so nice. So with that, do we need to do roll call, or can we do it by voice? So we have a motion with a second to approve the recommendation to Planning Commission. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed with a nay? Hearing none? Great.
Congratulations.
We'll get you a certificate for framing. Thank you, Kim, for stepping up. All right, we then have a budget committee. We have 2 seats on this vacant. Mr. Norikis and Kevin, you want to both come on up? We have actually had 3 applicants. A third one was not able to join us tonight for interviews. And so there are 2 seats open.
Are we going to reschedule that interview, or is that person no longer consideration?
It depends on you. We have these 2 here with 2 empty seats.
There you go.
So if they bomb the questions, cut one.
Those 2?
What, do Do we know the circumstances of which the other person couldn't attend? Or if they were,
Kathy, do
they
you?
know that it's a part of this position to be interviewed like this?
Yes, this is, we tried to schedule it one other time, and she was not able to attend, and then I believe it was late Friday or Saturday, she sent a message and said she wasn't going to be able to attend today either.
Was there any intent on?
She said she's still interested, yes. She's just not able to make the meeting on today.
The problems with it is, you know, it sounds like it made some attempts a couple of times to include, so we'll move ahead.
Yep.
Gentlemen, thank you both. We also have a series of questions for you guys, both being long-term budget experts, and on the previous committees, we would expect you to have nothing but the correct answers. So would you mind, Kevin, introducing yourself and, you know, why you've decided to re-up?
All right. Expert might be a bit of a stretch.
Oh, well,
I'm Kevin Hohenbaum. I'm a resident of Lincoln City, have been since, full-time since 2000 and, I don't even know, 15, I think, something like that. I am interested in serving on the Budget Committee. I just finished a term, and I think you said something earlier, Dick, about something being rather complicated, Planning Commission, and I think Budget Committee is rather complicated as well. After a degree, the first year I sat there and didn't open my mouth much, and the second year I opened it a few times and said stupid things, not quite a bit. The third year I opened it quite a bit, said stupid things, so I'm thinking that maybe I'm getting it down. I'm interested in serving again. I'm really starting to understand the process, and it really does take some time to figure it out.
thank you. Mr. Norikis?
I'm a longtime city resident, former city councilor with experience on former budget committees. And I'm interested in serving because I want to keep track of the financial health of the city, try and keep us on a stable footing.
Thank you. Mr. Oglin, could
All right.
you start us off?
Sure. Gentlemen, thank you again for reapplying. If you could eliminate one of Lincoln City services, what would it be? If you could eliminate one city service, what would it be? Would you like to start?
Jeez.
If I could choose, I would not eliminate one. If I had to choose, it would be the community center.
Doesn't make much money, huh?
It's very difficult to justify.
Mr. Hohenbaum?
I spent some time thinking about this. I think a couple of things. Number one, it's not the Budget Committee's position to eliminate or choose to eliminate services. That's based off of the Budget Committee looks at the recommendations that come from the city staff, which is based off of the recommendations from the city council. So I don't understand all of the services and experience all of the services in Lincoln City enough to be able to say, I think this one should go, or I think that one should go. I'm just, even after living here for 5 years and being on the Budget Committee for 3 years, there are a lot of services the city is involved in. The rec center would not be on my choices.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we'll go to Mr. Hohenbaum first.
Okay.
How can Lincoln City better engage the public in the budget process?
People get engaged when there's something that personally affects them. So I think that part of getting people engaged in the budget process or any other city process is if it reflects, it's part of their backyard, if they understand how that impacts them directly. The times we see people come and testify in front of the Budget Committee is when it's addressing something that they want, and the other times we don't see people at all. I'm sure it's probably very similar with council. One of the things that the city staff did last year with the budget, the city staff is, in the last 3 years, I've seen some changes in the way the budget is presented. And one of the things they did beneficial, that I think beneficial last year, is they really included some graphs and made it much more accessible for people to be able to pick it up and kind of make sense out of it instead of just being a spreadsheet with a bunch of lines. I think that's a good step towards that. looking for ways to get that notice out there about and those graphs out there, those pictures out there about what the city budget is, looking for ways to promote that besides just saying, oh, it's on the website, come find it. And people's access and ability to motor around the website is going to be varied. So finding ways to get that out in the public, I think that's important. But I think really the city staff has really made some nice progress towards making the budget process more accessible for people.
I would agree that the staff's done a good job. We already advertised the budget committee, I think, rather extensively. I mean, it's on the website, it's in the newspaper, it's announced on the radio, it's announced in the meetings. And we provide a copy of the budget in the library. And frankly, I do not know how we would further engage the public, other than paying them, perhaps.
Okay.
Gessler?
It's my turn. Okay. My question is this to Kevin. When one reads the budget, what should it tell them?
I think the budget is a document that should tell people what the priorities of the city are, not only from a revenue perspective, because that's a part of the budget, but what it really comes down to is what is the city spending money on? What is the council said is the priorities for the city? And that's really what the budget describes. It describes what the priorities of the city are.
Chester?
For me, when I look at the budget, try and determine where our tax dollars are going, plus the cost of operating each department of city government, plus the projected future revenue and expenses. In other words, are we spending beyond our means? Those are my priorities in looking at a budget.
Thank you.
Start with Mr. Norikis. How do you know if the city is spending too much or too little on a city service?
I do not know, but doing a cost-benefit analysis on essential services such as water and sewer could be one approach. Comparison studies of services in communities of comparable size and economies might be another approach. For, quote, non-essential services, such as the library and community center, personal preference and notions of importance, I suspect, would apply.
Mr. Holbaum?
As Mr. Noriega says, really doing some comparisons with other cities on what they're spending on individual services, like-minded cities. But I think the number one flag I look at is the year over year. So if you see that incrementally there's change, and all of a sudden there's a big change from one year to the next, then it makes one wonder, what is the difference? Why did something flag out there? And then after that, going back and looking at what other cities are paying for like-minded services, which is tough comparison because every city is structured differently, and the things that we include in Lincoln City, we include in our water budget might be things that Newport doesn't include in their water budget. So you really have to do some digging to be able to make good comps that way.
Thank you.
Do you want to use Kevin again? What are the biggest opportunities and challenges facing Lincoln City?
For me, I think one of the biggest opportunities facing Lincoln City is to make Lincoln City a place that's family-friendly for playing, so that families can come here and play and enjoy, because we really, from a city, that's one of our biggest drivers of revenue, is getting people to visit the city. And I think there's some things that the council and the city can do to not just structure it, but like the projects with sidewalks, like the head to Bay Trail. I mean, there's things that are out there that the city can work on and change some things structurally in the city that will help make the place more family-friendly to come. Where can people come and ride bikes? Where can people come, maintain the skate park? All those pieces of action, I think those are opportunities. Some of the challenges, I think housing is probably first and foremost, or one of the highest ones. I think really looking at challenges in Lincoln City aren't necessarily things the city can't. Some things the city can impact, some things they can impact less so. I think one of the biggest challenges in Lincoln City is that some of the social determinants of health and some of the not just the homelessness that we see, but the struggles that people have to be able to take care of themselves. And if you don't have your health care in place, then how can you get your kids into education? And if your kids haven't had breakfast, how can they learn during school? And if we don't have educated kids, how are we going to continue to grow as a community and grow as a city? So I think there's some pieces that are really challenging for Lincoln City that the city has a less ability to impact on. Doesn't mean they don't have any, but it's a less part of their functions.
Chester, opportunities and challenges facing the city?
In my opinion, the biggest challenges are preserving our potable water supply and providing workforce housing. Our biggest opportunity is the land we own at the village's Cascade Head, which has the potential to provide workforce housing.
Thank you.
Okay, last question. How do you prioritize where the city spends its funds? And Chester, we'll let you go ahead and start first.
I feel that the health and safety of our citizens is of utmost importance, and therefore would prioritize maintenance and development of our water collection, treatment, and delivery system, and our sewage transport and disposal system.
I think for me, the prioritizing doesn't come necessarily from the budget committee. It comes from the budget the staff puts together based off of the guidance from the city council. So to be able to prioritize what the city, how the city spends its funds, it takes, first of all, understanding what the council's goals are. Then I think it takes talking to community connections, because just as the council represents different wards and represents different parts of the city, and each of you are connected to your social worlds and the people in your communities, and you have connections with those, the budget committee is just bringing in an additional 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people who also have different connections in the city, and more voices that we get, the more we can really clearly understand what priorities are. So I think talking to my own community connections, each of us doing the same, and then just listening to the voices.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I neglected at the start to describe the budget committee, and Kevin, you touch on it a little bit. It's a 14-member committee, 7 counselors and 7 other citizens, and come together, review the budget that's proposed by staff, make amendments either way, and move it on to city council. So it's actually, staff starts now forming the budget for the coming year, and we generally as a committee get it in April. So we have April and May we work on it. So it's a nice committee, whereas Chester indicated you get the sense of the city, and Kevin, certainly the money talks, but it's also a nice committee because it's a limited duration of time you have to serve. And so I appreciate both your past tenure with the budget committee, because it's, as Kevin, as you indicated, it does have a learning curve with it, and it helps to keep you there for a while. One of the few things where seasoning helps, I think. Recommendations, motions, indicated we have 2 vacant spots on the budget committee.
I have a question first, if I could, of our city recorder. Kathy, I'm forgetting how long the terms are for this. 4 years? Okay. Okay, so, all right. May I keep going?
Yep.
Okay, I would like to make a motion then to appoint Chester Noriakis and Kevin Holmbaum to the Budget Committee for the 4-year terms that are available now.
Second.
We have a motion to appoint both individuals, and second from Councilor Coos. Any further discussion? Counselor?
Just on a kind of a personal level, I'll mention that first served on the Budget Committee 2 years ago, 2018, and I greatly value the contributions from both Chester and Kevin. I felt like I've learned a lot from their being on the committee, and glad that they're back again.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed with a nay? Hearing none. Thank you, gentlemen. You're on again.
Congratulations.
If I may, Your Honor.
Yes.
I'd like to thank you all for all the work you've done over the past year, and good health in 2020.
Thank you. Same
Thank
to
you
sir.
all.
All right, back on our agenda, we have City Council deliberation. This is regarding Resolution 2020-02, a resolution authorizing disposition of real property for purposes of transitional housing. I remind you that we had a public hearing on this resolution back in December 9th, 2019. We listened to the public and closed the hearing and the record. And so we now have deliberation. This was also, as you read your packet, it reminded you of twofold. One, the city going in partnership, in essence, a public-private partnership with providing a loan for rehabbing and some funds, forgivable funds to purchase this property and turn it into a transitional housing. It's gone through the conditional use process. So, I don't know if there's, Mr. Chandler, anything else as a preview?
Just a summary of the council communications, a little bit from me and a little bit from Mr. Appicello. Just as a reminder, the purchase of the property is $400,000, and those funds would come from the Facilities Capital Fund Reserve. There is currently $1,198,366 in the reserve. Following the use of that, that still preserves the $600,000 that we had, as the Budget Committee and then as the City Council, tried to maintain that amount as a future reserve. The closing of the property is scheduled on or before the 21st of this month. If we fail to do that, then we would lose the earnest money that we had put in. The resolution also calls for then the partnering with Helping Hands. Mr. Appicello is going to talk a little bit about the mechanisms whereby that's done. I'm going to talk a little bit about the financial aspect of it. This also includes a $350,000 loan that would be made to Helping Hands. That would come from the general fund contingency. We have $2 million in that contingency, and so it would come from there. Later in the meeting, there's also some information regarding some other expenditures associated with that. The resolution also authorizes the city manager and the city attorney to purchase the property and then to sell the property according to the provisions set by the City Council. And those are on packet pages 38 under Section 3. And Mr. Appicello is going to talk a little bit about the mechanisms whereby all this takes place.
First, I just want to talk about the label we've been using of transitional housing. Earlier, the planning director withdrew the proposed amendment to the code added definition of transitional housing. That amendment was not needed by this application. What happened in this case is that the Helping Hands basically went to the planning department and said, here is the proposed use. They happen to use the word transitional housing, but it's the use that they described in their application and on their brochure. It involves housing as well as counseling. They applied for that use. The planning director, using her discretion, looked at the use and then looked at our zoning code, and then in the exercise of her discretion, in a noticed decision, decided that the use was more like an emergency shelter use than other uses, and as such was not a permitted use in the GC zone, but rather should be processed as a conditional use. She made that decision. She noticed that decision. The appeal period for that decision ran, and that decision became final. The applicant then made application for the conditional use. And again, it's been shorthand referred to as transitional housing, but the application, that's just a label. It could be called Bob for all we care. It's just what was contained in the application. So that application went through the conditional use process at the Planning Commission. The last time we were here, we decided to continue deliberations on this so that we can wait to see if there would be an appeal of that decision. There was no timely appeal of that decision, and so that decision is now final. The label, however, is being problematic. So in the resolution itself, where we talk about the Helping Hands Reentry and Outreach Center proposal to provide, I think we want to talk about, and you can always use transitional housing as the shorthand, but I think what we want to do is refer to the use as described and approved in CUP 2019-04. That's what we're talking about. And it just not, because there's a definition of transitional housing in the statutes, which is in the 446 chapter, having to do with, you can have yurts and things like that, and we don't want to confuse. That is not what was applied for. What was applied for is the facility and counseling services that were set forth in the application. It was properly processed in accordance with our land use ordinance and made final. The ordinance amending the code was kind of like, well, we should probably try to allow for this kind of facility in the future, so we added that, and unfortunately that has caused some confusion. So apologize for that. That's planning director decided we don't want to cause confusion. We're just going to withdraw that. So on the resolution that's before you, I've made some suggested language changes to address this labeling, use of the word transitional housing, and I'll read those in a minute. But as Ron stated, I should tell you what the proposed deal is and what the assurances are that the city wants to, again, this is for the protection of the city. The city would purchase the property, and we're only purchasing it if there is this approval of this resolution. So that was one of the conditions in the purchase and sale agreement that we've signed. We would go forward and we would only convey this property by deed with the fee simple determinable condition that it be operated for the use as described and approved in CUP 2019-04. Whatever the label you want to put on it, that's the use that we're requiring. It's defined precisely by the land use approval. It's not somebody's interpretation of what it is. It's not some statutory definition. It's what was approved in that land use application. So that condition would result in the automatic reversion of the property to the city without anything further happening. It actually happened to us, and I used this example in the staff report. There was I think it was a deed to Ocean Lake, and it said the property had to be used for an open septic kind of facility, sewage lagoon or something, and we didn't use it that way, and so ODOT took the property back because that's the kind of deed we received. So that's the first protection the city has, is if the use as approved in the CUP is not conducted on this property, the property comes back to the city. Now, we also discussed in the public hearing, and staff believes that the council's direction was, we're also going to hold a trust deed on the $400,000 purchase price. And like we did with the food bank land exchange, we would excuse the not monthly, but yearly payment on the trust deed of the $400,000 purchase price if they complied with certain conditions. And those conditions were listed out in the staff report. Continuous operation of the use as described in the CUP, not to violate any city ordinances or laws, maintenance of the nonprofit status. Those things would be detailed not in this resolution, but in the note to be written by me and signed by Ron and well, accepted by Ron because they sign it. And as well as the note and the guarantee and the trust deed are all just pretty much forms, but the main condition is they need to operate the use as approved, not violate laws, maintain their nonprofit status. And if they fail to demonstrate that they're doing that, then the $13,333 payment is due. It's an annual payment. Let's see, that's kind of like the second security we have. First we have the deed, then we have this trust deed and note and guarantee. Then the Economic Development Department through the COG administers rehab loans, and we have a process for review and approval of those loans, and apparently they've gone through the process. It hasn't come to completion yet, but that's a separate process, but there's a $350,000 rehab, which will basically have the same trust deed, note, guarantee associated with, and that's an actual payment. They're actually paying that back. And that's one of the other conditions of our $400,000 trust deed is that they make all those payments. So that's kind of the third guarantee that they conduct the use as described in approved COP 2019-04. All this is made possible because under state statute, the city may convey real property to a nonprofit organization that provides social services, and we went through that during the public hearing. And at this point, it's really up to you to decide if you want to spend the money this way. I would say that this, I'm just going to read, this is not an ordinance, and I don't have to read all changes. I would just want to tell you what the changes would be. The resolution title would say a resolution of the City of Lincoln City authorizing and directing disposition of city real property to Helping Hands Reentry Outreach Centers for the use as described and approved in COP 2019-04. I'm getting away from the label or branding as transitional housing because we don't want to cause confusion. Again, everybody knows it's always been Helping Hands. That's the applicant, and it was their program that we've been discussing through all this, and that's what's in the application. The advertised purpose of the sale conveyance and the reason the City Council finds it necessary and convenient to sell the real property to the domestic nonprofit organization Helping Hands Reentry Outreach Centers is the Council's desire to provide the use as proposed by Helping Hands in COP 2019-04. And here where, in addition, I say that the property must be used for the, quote, transitional housing facility as use as proposed by Helping Hands in COP 2019-04. And again, adding language, operates a facility approved in COP 2019-04, as opposed to using the words transitional housing. Again, I don't want to debate what is approved. What's approved is in the land use approval itself. And I added a sentence, it is understood and agreed that the use approved in COP 2019-04 is a use described in the application and approved by the Planning Commission, and despite the label or unfortunate branding of the use as transitional housing, the use is not transitional housing as described in ORS 446-265. That would, again, just be to clarify that. And finally, one other change is to This furthers the public interest as the sale will further the city council's desire to provide the services described in approved CUP 2019-04 to the city of Lincoln City's homeless population, instead of using the words transitional housing. So with that, it's up to you. I'll answer any questions.
I have a couple questions.
Yes.
One, and maybe I missed something, so just say that on page 25, and it's not in the resolution, that's why I'm saying you've clarified some things tonight, and so you can help me with this. Okay. In the description of transitional housing, we're deleting that, right? I mean, it's just not going to be part of.
Yes, as noted, the proposed amendment is been removed. We don't
Okay.
need that, and that's not necessary for this application.
So we don't need this description, so that question is taken care of. Thank you. And then the other question I had, you just mentioned it, and I just want to make sure I understand. Oh, wait. Let me ask you a question first about on page 30. Second paragraph, about 3/4 of the way down, it says, and provide transitional housing services to homeless in this community within 1 year. Is that part of the agreement?
That's part of the note, and that's because the CUP that was approved by the Planning Commission was done under the CUP standards, which require that they engage in substantial construction during that year. I could go to the code and read it, but it basically is consistent with that. I tried to put and this is, I didn't give these documents to you to review, but basically consistent with the conditional use approval, they have to sign a note agreeing to operate the use. We understand that in the first year, they can't be continuously operating this facility because they're going to be rehabbing the facility. And they're required to basically complete that substantial construction in accordance with the standards that are set forth in the conditional use code.
So would substantial completion then also be open for business, that they could actually house people? I mean, I'm just worried about that time because we all know about how construction creeps, and even though they're responsible for it, they understand it, and they'll probably get it done early. That's not my point.
Note expects that they'll be doing construction over much of this year, but they must have operations underway within 1 year of closing.
And why?
That's in the note.
Why don't, because we know about construction creep, why aren't we a little more generous rather than that 1 year?
Because basically the conditional use approval could have given them more time, but the Planning Commission did not.
Did they know that was an option?
Well, it's in the standards that are quoted. Staff
Can
didn't
we
specifically
amend
ask.
that as we, tonight? I mean, to me, probably every single one of us in this room has had some type of construction project that they have done on their home, in their business. You know, just look at our sidewalks or our pipes for the city, and we have a deadline of when that's to be completed. And time again, that is not met, not because of the methods or who's doing the work, but it's just what happens. The plumber doesn't show up. The permitting guy's sick for a month.
And I can't change the conditions of the Planning Commission
This is
imposed,
ridiculous.
nor can you at this time. They can, of course, come forward and ask for an amendment, but again, the standard is rather discretionary. Substantial construction. What is substantial you know, if they're not done, the planning director is going to have to make a decision, and probably it'll be a notice decision where she's exercising discretion.
I get the substantial, let me just finish, please. I get the substantial completion. What my question is it says that transitional housing service to homeless in this community within 1 year. So it's not just saying substantial completion, it's saying people are moving in.
That's because there's a fee simple
And
determinable fee condition on the deed, and that means we expect this use to be operated.
But they have to have the sign off saying that people can live in that building.
So let,
I
Chandler?
don't like it. Oh, sorry,
The-
I don't like it.
The standards in the Title 17 for conditional use permit require, they don't require, but the expiration date is 1 year, but there is a provision that the applicant can request a 1-year extension, and that 1-year extension request would go to the Planning Commission.
So there's a process to get an extension and go beyond the 1 year.
Yes.
Okay.
Councilor Mark?
I'm just wondering if we can invite the Helping Hands people into the conversation to get their,
Well, since
No.
there's a
Okay.
provision, there's a provision for an amendment
Okay.
or extension,
I
then
just-
that
Okay,
needs your...
okay. Did you hear it back there? You can ask for, okay. Can I ask my next question?
That's independent of our deal that we have with this purchase. I understand that that's in Title 17 for other things, but this also includes for this special,
Well, the conditional use
not.
approval has to be complied with.
right, so it doesn't allow for it. It does not.
The conditional use permit requirement allows for the 1-year extension. It, I believe, from what is being described here, is there's, from what Mr. Appicello said, there's also something on the deed about the 1-year restriction. So if counselors wished to include the allowance for a 1-year extension request, that would also need to be included on this deed.
Right, so you have a yes,
Process.
but then a further no.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, if you would like to give them more than a year, okay, it's not the code that's dictating a year for them to continue to operate. What that is, that's me saying, looking at the time frame for construction has to be substantially completed, and that this is a fee simple determinable. They don't have forever to initiate this use.
Could we please make that change?
To what?
I don't know, a year and a half.
So...
They'll get, I'm sure that they will be finished way before a year's time. I'm just saying, there's a lot of what-ifs in construction.
So I'm wondering out loud why why we can't incorporate the Title 17 where the Helping Hands would have to initiate a request. We keep the 1 year, and then they have to come forward and substantiate a extension of time, so that the note could allow for, upon request.
Or basically, you have to commence the use within 1 year unless an extension of construction is granted by the Planning Commission.
Right.
So I can do that.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. Other questions? Or
I have another one,
you have another one?
after everyone else has had a chance.
Other questions? Well,
Well, just go ahead. I mean,
Yeah.
just,
All right,
I'll
all right.
wait.
Okay. My other question, if I can find it, is about the, and I'm not sure if it's in this, I'll just ask Mr. Appicello. It's about the whereabouts where people come that would be serviced by Helping Hands in this new facility. Does it say in the, I don't know the language, but
The resolution refers to the use as proposed by Helping Hands in COP 2019-04 to the city of Lincoln City's homeless population. That's what the resolution is.
okay, and that's fine, but what
doesn't
if
mean you have
there's
to-
somebody that's, from 20 miles away? They're going to be
If-
turned away because they aren't a resident, which they don't have a residence?
Yeah, I think if you get off a bus here in Lincoln City or hitchhike here to Lincoln City and you're from Spokane or Philadelphia or whatever, you can enter into this program because you're part of the Lincoln City homeless population. And if you hitch down here from Otis, and I think you're part of the Lincoln City's homeless population. What we're trying to avoid is
Right.
having an entire busload of people from another facility in a different state or different part of this state be bussed in and say, here's an
Right.
entire busload of people from another facility. That's all.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
yes.
But also, in their process, Counselor Hinton, there is a referral process, so that takes place as well.
Right.
But on that note, are all the agencies involved have some sort of universal training by Helping Hands to tell them, this is our process? So let's just say it's the Lincoln City Police have a different referral criteria than does the Lincoln County homeless something. You know, so we're banking on this referral thing that is given by multitudes of organizations. How many in Lincoln City are going to have this golden ticket to give to a homeless person that they're going to take? And what's their process? So we're using this referral as the way to keep it safe, but we don't know who's giving them out and how they're going to give them out.
Yeah, we do.
No, we don't.
So I think, you know, you're into operations first, and I think part of this discussion has to be, you know, who our potential partner is here and why we've advanced this far. We have a degree of comfort with their past operations and existing operations, not only in Lincoln City, but other places. So at the end of the day, you know, by nature of the definition, homeless means they don't have a place. So they may be from somewhere, but they're here. And I think that, as Mr. Appicello has stated, what we're trying to prevent is full-scale overuse of the facility the citizens of Lincoln City have funded for Philadelphians to come in for all, you know, sake. And we've already heard the operation, there is some exchange for domestic abuse and those kind of things from other areas. So there will be people moving in and out. It's just the confidence in the provider that they understand citizens of Lincoln City are funding this, extending as a bank, and that's why we're even here, is to serve our citizens.
If you have 5 people from Lincoln City and 20 come in from somewhere else, and you need those people in the building to generate your revenue to pay your fee, what are you going to do?
I would expect Helping Hands will be talking to us. I would think that would be the appropriate management would be
There's
talking.
no condition, I mean, there's no percentage of
Yeah,
occupants.
But if we're going to get into that kind of nitpicky, you know, unfortunately, they'd be dealing with a government that knows how to nitpick.
Mr. Mayor, can we speak to the resolution?
Pardon?
Speak to this resolution? I mean, I feel like these are logistic things, and we're talking about the resolution.
But I think it's the note and thing, and that's what I'm hearing. If we're talking about $750,000 going out the door, and I think it's we all have to get comfortable that this is how you want to spend that money. And so I think we deserve at least some extent, but not to travel so far. And that's why I was indicating that I think how it operates, we've got to have some degree of comfort that they know what they're doing and know our intent. But go ahead.
In addition to that, if it's 3/4 of completed and there's no money and there's nothing and it stops, something happens, where is our repayment at that time? We just take the ownership of the building and then we're out the $350,000 of the loan, right? So is there processes for
Well, in essence, both are loans.
I understand.
One's forgivable, one's
One we get the
payback.
property, but then the other.
But you're right. As a good construction lender, I would hope you'd never be out of your 350 without completion. And we're counting on a lender expertise to handle those draws and that kind of stuff. I think your question is, you're right. We, the city, always have the potential of getting the property back by virtue of that's our security.
Sure.
And, you know, is it a single use? What are we going to do with it? And that kind of stuff. I think, again, depending on where and what, you know, it's housing and facilities, and those are some of the things we're short of. So perhaps other providers, whether it be Chance, whether it be Family Promise, or anybody else, may be as interested in providing a service to the community. But it's a, and you're right on, it's a risk. You're putting $750 out.
I mean, you tell me the last time we spent $750 on.
Right. And a good, but let's, because I think that's another discussion that we need to have. But I think to Councilor Casper's point, the resolution talks about the debt and how and all these kind of things. Are there technical points on that that need to be answered? We've gone over it a lot of times, but.
Well, the trustee to note again, or the fee simple, which one to do?
All. We're
Both
doing
for
all.
both.
We're doing the trust deed on the construction loan, we're doing the trust deed on the purchase price, and we're doing the fee simple determinable condition. We're doing all three.
Oh, I got confused because then you said it may wish to execute a standard purchase and sale agreement.
Well,
So
that's-
I was like,
that's-
well, which one are we?
No, the standard purchase and sale agreement is just that we need to get title insurance and
Okay.
pay closing costs, and everything else is standard.
Other questions, clarification on the transaction itself? I think, the other thing I would like us to talk about is we've done and publicly now, is the priorities. I mean, we've talked of the structure in executive session. We've certainly made it public with the public hearing and everything else. This is the first time, that this has been exposed. But as you know, we have many other priorities of funding. And, here is taking, a big chunk out of it. I think last council meeting, we made motion for $500,000 for PERS to be, go to PERS to catch a match, and have also applied for or put a position in for another $1.5 million, where with PERS, we get a direct payback or at least a match. So all this money comes from the same place, taxpayers. So I'm just trying to remind us one last time of all the priorities, and you remember the list. I think it came to over $4 million. It was a wish list. So, and we don't have it, just as a reminder. But it's a nice wish list. So I'm asking you, in your thinking, is where, does this still stand? Obviously, if you're ready to move ahead, it stands as your number one, priority and opportunity. Because if you have to, you'd forego the others. And that's thoughts, discussion, because we needed to have this kind of conversation publicly.
I'm for moving forward.
Other, Councilor Mark?
It's a somber decision, and it's a serious use of taxpayer dollars, but I also see this as a opportunity that, kind of a rare opportunity that this community's been aching for a facility of this sort, and I think the need is clear, and I think it's time to go ahead.
I agree.
So
I agree. Part of it is that we've talked about homeless, we've talked about transitional, we've talked about housing over and over and over again. I'm ready to move forward. I think it's something, it shows that we're doing something.
I just say again.
I am not. I'm not there, guys. I'm not there. This is a lot of money for a project that we went out and did and brought to us. And I don't see, I've been homeless, okay? I did live out there. I know what it's like. And I don't feel like this is the time to do that. And I appreciate everybody's work. I mean, you guys are coming down from up north, and their passion speaks volumes, and it's a great thing. But $750,000 for this project is just beyond what I feel comfortable for the whole city. I understand we have a problem. I know our school district has a ton of homeless and transitional challenged people, but it's a lot of money to do this, and I'm just not there.
I'd just like to remind you that
Could you
it's,
speak up?
I said I'd just like to remind you that it's really 400 that you're speaking of, the
Thank you.
350s alone, and that we get that paid back.
It's $750,000 that the city is spending.
Okay.
If, with big ifs, 30 years down the road.
Mr. Mayor?
Let me get Councilor Mark.
Well, and I just, I've been thinking about this for weeks, and I had another thought kicking around in my head, and I forgot to mention it earlier. I should have written some of it down. Two things. We heard at a recent planning commission meeting when Chance and the warming shelter applied for their permit, and there were quite a few people in that neighborhood speaking up to complain about the problems in their neighborhood because that facility was close by. And there might be people here, we haven't had a chance to hear from the neighborhood around this Helping Hands building, also concerned about.
Yeah, well, yes, we have. We had public hearings. Planning Commission and City Council had public hearings.
Okay. Neighborhood safety is, really important. But at the same time, you weigh that against the need, and you see homeless people here. And what it came down to is, here we are in January, cold nights and pouring rain, and I keep thinking we have people living in the woods in Lincoln City. And the obvious thing is that that's just not right. And if we can provide between the Chance facility and Helping Hands and maybe the churches and Family Promise, if we can get people out of the woods and into someplace safe and warm and dry this time of year, I think we have a responsibility to do that. Those facilities also have a responsibility to those neighborhoods to keep those people feeling safe, and that's vital. But what it came down to, in my mind, yeah, it is a lot of money. Well, one thing, and then we had a comment from a church official who said that really it's only one church is really stepping up to provide this sort of help. So the churches are out there, but we're not really hearing that they're helping. So it's a mix. There's taxpayer dollars and there's nonprofit agency dollars, all going to work to reduce the seriousness of this problem. And it just came down to right or wrong to me.
Councilor Casper?
We've been working at this for a long time, and we were elected to make good decisions and be responsible for the members of our community. I think we've done our homework. We've tried to get everybody to work together under one umbrella. That was hard to do and impossible. We've come up with other solutions, this being one of them and the most sound and responsible that we have offered to us. We're taking a big step. We're being leaders. And that's what we were elected to do, is to lead. And we're not doing it blindly. There are children out there. I like this facility because it deals with families. And we need to turn that around. And if we don't take some leadership and responsibility and try, having done our homework, I think we're neglecting the people we represent.
Any other? If I can add on, housing has always been our number one priority as the council. And certainly transitional housing is a component of that, and we talked about that before. So that matches why we've come this far, is because we were exploring, all housing venues, so to speak. The other is, it's, I think, taking from Helping Hands, it's not a Band-Aid. They counsel mental health and addiction, but unlike so many more, they also recognize that they need to house these folks for longer-term treatment. And for all of us, I think I can speak for all of us, we saw that as different and why Helping Hands is here today. They've done well with the dance, so to speak. So the trouble I have, so I'm agreeing with where we've gone, what we've done, except where I struggle is one, as I read the charter and look at what the responsibility of the city, I don't find social services. I find sewer and water and streets, police. So, not that it's wrong, but we've ventured off with social services into an area that is clearly in the public county government domain. And last I heard, they might be willing to send us 60,000. So it's a far cry from this 750. So I appreciate and will take anything the county would share with us. And then I looked at our other alternatives, the things we've done, had on that list, and the PERS piece came up. And, that's a continuing increasing debt that will, and it has already increased year by year as to what we have to pay for the PERS closure. And here we had an offer of some state matching funds, and that means we get some of our state taxes back to reduce our own taxpayers' obligations. So, quasi some different pots of money, but again, at the end of the day, it comes out of the taxpayers. So I'm struggling with where would I prioritize this, and for a long time, the Helping Hands, the housing project that we've got, was right up there. I'm concerned about our financial drawdown on reserves and what we'll be facing into the future. We know the PERS piece won't go away, so we don't have a choice there. And I guess that's where I'm struggling personally as to where I would put funds, that would help a larger group of citizens. And not to argue that there aren't folks benefiting, but it would be the greater group. So, any other comments? We haven't heard from Mitch. I don't know if he wants to weigh in. But I would take a motion for the resolution, and we can still then have a deliberation.
If you want.
So we have the resolution on the table.
When you make the motion, if on the resolution, if you make it, if you can refer to the changes to, instead of transitional housing, to refer to the use as approved in the conditional use approval.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 2020-02A as approved in the conditional use permit regarding ordinance 2013-19-04.
Second.
We have a motion to approve resolution 2020-02, and with a second from Councilor Hinton.
Can I just read the revised title?
Okay.
Okay, so it's Resolution 2020-02, a resolution of the City of Lincoln City authorizing and directing disposition of city real property to Helping Hands Reentry Outreach Centers for the use as described and approved in CUP 2019-04.
Thank you. Any other deliberation? Councilor Parsons, did you want anything weigh in, or anybody else? Councilor Hinton, did you have something you wanted to?
Well, the only thing I was going to say is, I think back when people were considering, like you had mentioned, the charter, and just what all cities have been going through with housing being such a critical issue and homeless growing all the time, that I think the timing is right that we move forward with this.
I'll just, another thought that I had kicking around was, one, the reason that tax dollars are going to this organization, and maybe not some of the others, is we mentioned their track record, and the fact that the people that go, as I understand it, that go through their program are people who are there because they're looking for help. And they need to engage in the program, they need to take part and participate. They're not just there for a handout. And the other angle, and I go back to the living in the woods thing, and you talk about a citywide benefit. I think we make the city safer if we provide a place for people who are maybe, don't have a place to be overnight. And there's also the element of the parks people are left cleaning up those campsites in the woods, and I hope that this would go, to some degree to reduce that problem as well.
Okay. Could we have a roll call, please?
Casper,
Yes.
Hinton,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Coos,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Parsons,
Yes.
and Anderson.
No.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right. We now have audits.
Yeah. I got
Oh, I'm sorry.
public comment.
Oh, right here I jumped right by. We have public comments. Thank you. Before anyone comes up for public comments, let me read a statement. Be advised, statements and comments, here it is, of the Article 1, Section 8 of the Oregon Constitution provides no law shall be passed restraining the free expression of opinion or restricting the right to speak, write, or print freely on any subject whatever. But every person shall be responsible for the abuse of this right. Be advised, statements and comments by citizens under comments for citizens present or on public hearings or public comment items are solely the opinions and statements of the speakers and are not statements by the City of Lincoln City and do not represent the opinions of the city, its officers, and employees. And with that, we have Ryan Ulicni.
It's our varsity soccer coach.
Oh, all right. Yeah, you guys make it hard on me. I apologize.
Not a problem.
But give us a pronunciation and who, write it in the mic.
Ulicni. So it's like a long C in the middle there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm the Taft High School boys soccer coach. We just moved here 3 years ago, and I just got involved in the coaching here last year, and then again this year as the high school varsity soccer coach. I originally got here worked at the community center as the sports coordinator. Got involved with all the kids' soccer, track, worked with Mitch, doing track and field. It was great, and the thing that I've always noticed as a parent and as a coach or as an employee is that there's never enough space. I've applied for myself a nonprofit license that I'm going to start fundraising for an indoor soccer facility. I've gotten the words out on this is my first meeting and first council meeting, and I have a whole new respect for all of you. It's incredible. I'm just trying to get the word out there right now. My license should go through at the end of the month. I'll be back again to tell how people can donate to it, what the plan is. I have an email address that they can email, and I can get the plan to them. Right now I'm trying to fundraise so I can get a cost from a contractor. Basically, it was a cost analysis of what it would take to build a facility somewhere here in Lincoln City. But that cost analysis is going to be roughly about $7,000, which I'm trying to raise. But I put up the money for the licensing and the fees and everything myself. So this is like the second step that I'm taking, and I'm trying to get the word out there to everybody. So I'm saying some flyers. I have some. I'll leave some on the back table there. If anybody wants, they can email the contact information, and I can forward the further plan. I also have a business plan down the road for that with statistics for Lincoln County going back to 2018. So it's just informational from me.
Well, that's great. Good to hear. Can I make a suggestion that
Absolutely.
you spend some time with our planning director or specifically to learn a little more about zones and what can go in zones?
Absolutely.
So as you're
It has to be
looking
a
for
commercial,
property, you-
it has to be a commercially zoned. It's either the C1 or C2.
So just-
There's a couple spots here in town that are residential that can be converted, as I've been told. So
yeah,
there's a,
go to the desk and make sure.
yeah, I've been told.
That's
so
all I'm
gonna
going to
wait.
say. Just go to the desk.
For those not here, what's the email address?
It is Ryan at sandtigersinc, .org. So the nonprofit business is called Sand Tigers Incorporated.
Great. Well, that's great. Good to hear.
So just a little info, and I'll be back again next month, let you know progress.
All right.
All
Thank
right?
you.
Thank you.
All right. Jay Hamilton.
Mayor, Council, thank you for letting me speak. This concerns 8th Court, Northwest 8th Court off Inlet. It concerns ordinances, those types of things that are being violated. My main concern on that street, it's a gravel road and it's narrow and hard to drive on a good day. I've had comments from 2 or 3 garbage collection people and delivery people that hate that street because it's obstructed with, on both sides actually, I think. And I think that street should be surveyed and the corners established and boundaries established on both sides of the street to, it's a line of sight kind of a thing. Makes a couple bends and it's hard to navigate. Some folks back here live up the street. I'm on the corner, so I'm not so much affected by it, but they are. They have a lot more information.
Can you say
Could
the
I,
street
yeah,
again?
could you,
The street again?
yeah.
8th Court,
Northeast 8th?
Northwest.
Oh.
Did I say northeast?
I don't know what
No,
you
you
said,
said
so I
northwest.
just didn't have it.
Northwest 8th Court
Okay.
off Inlet.
Is that the gravel road to the west of where like Dutch Brothers and the Samaritan Clinic
As
is?
you go back north.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's Inlet is
Okay.
right there, so.
Great.
I live on the corner. It's a narrow street. It's a
Right, S
hard
is right
street
up
to traverse anyway on that
Is there a
corner.
pump station at the end of that?
Pardon?
Is there a pump station at the end of it? That's not that one?
Not that I'm aware of, no. But my main concern is safety.
Good.
We've had some 911 issues up there, and they found it hard to navigate.
Okay. Is there parking on both sides? Is that part of the problem? It's a narrow road?
I think it's both sides of the street. It's a narrow street, and there are some vacationing people that come in and go, and,
Okay.
and parking is a serious issue there.
Okay.
But I think if it's boundaries, like I said, if the boundaries on that street are established and enforced by ordinance regulations, I think it'll help a lot. But the folks behind me have a lot more information.
Okay. But that's good. Thank you, because we do keep track, so I appreciate you coming forward, because citizens remind us or point out roads that aren't working well. And I know Public Works keeps track of that, as so we, as we're doing things, we can make corrections, so, thank you.
So I think that'll help, but I'd like to give them a little more
Sure.
time back there, so
right.
that's what I have to say.
Great, thanks for coming forward.
Thank you.
Perry Freed.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I've got some
Perry,
copies.
could you just speak into the mic and give us
Sorry
your
about
name
that.
for the record?
Again, Perry Freed. I live on 8th Court. I've got some copies here I'd like to hand out. There's pictures.
If you'd given to the clerk, that would be terrific.
Perfect.
What do you got for us?
Sorry about that. I was just.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, thank you.
she'll get 'em.
Okay, so, gentleman that just spoke, we all live on the same street. I live almost at the very end of this street that we're talking about. So I come before you in frustration due to the lack of performance from the city code officer of Lincoln City. I've filled out several code violation reports, 6 times to be exact, and have lived at my home since 2012. So approximately 8 years I've lived in my house. I pay approximately $7,420 a year in taxes on this piece of property. I've complained to the last code enforcement officer, and I've received some help with him coming out and tagging the guy's tires and stuff like that. The problem on 8th Court, as was stated, is a very small gravel road that dead ends. This road is supposed to be 20 feet wide. As the road is now, there's places that are 9 feet wide. If you look at the copies that you have in front of you, you can see the layout of the road. The highlighted areas are the problems. The owner at 1129 Northwest 8th Court lets a person rent a space in a travel trailer that this person lives in. According to the city, this is a code violation. You're not allowed to live in a travel trailer or any type of motorhome in this city. This is an illegal code violation. If you also look at the same picture, this travel trailer is over the property line. And that looks like apparently to the north is where this is over the property line. Number two, this same person built some form of fence onto the city property and or city way. You can see some of the pictures there. Number three, he has put signs, banners, flags, etc. up and on this temporary wall, if you will. To me, this is called graffiti. He doesn't have a permit for these. He was told to take them down, and they're still up. This is also a code violation. The same person has had dumped large amounts of gravel onto the city right-of-way. When he was asked to remove it off the city road, he replied, "Just drive over it." When we went to the city and complained about this, it took approximately 3 days to have any kind of help or relief, to have some form of it moved back enough to have a regular car drive around it. No truck and no other large vehicle could go around this big mess. North Lincoln Sanitary Services could not go up the road when that gravel was in the road. Sometimes he can't even get his truck. He has to back up this road, and he can't get his truck all the way to the top of the road where the trash is that he's got to get, because of all of the vehicles that are parked and blocking his way up the road. The same person has a bunch of trash built up that's on the city road. There's a water heater, large forms of buckets. They look like fish ponds or something like that with garbage in them. Very disrespectful to the neighborhood and to the city. I have filed complaints for about 6 years, off and on, about these problems that have been going on, and really nothing's been done. He removes the things for 2-3 days, then all of a sudden, then they come back again. I would like to see the 20 feet of right-of-way that we pay for as a city community to have our roads open that we can drive on, to have our FedEx truck and our UPS truck, trash truck, and utilities be able to come up this street without being pinched into a corner or have another guy coming up the street and nearly hitting a parked car somewhere on that street. I am a general contractor in this community. I've been here for many, many years. I have a good-sized dump trailer that I use at my home when I'm taking things out or I park there. And in order for me to get this vehicle on my property, I have to turn around, back up, and then go up the hill. And because all of these vehicles that this gentleman owns has pinched me so bad onto my property, I can't even bring that trailer up onto my property. So, as you can see the pictures, he's got 2 trailers that are not hooked to anything. That's a code violation, and they're parked on the city street. He's got 3 vehicles that none of which move except for one.
I'm going to cut you off here.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to, because your 5 minutes is up, and we'll let some of your neighbors continue to talk. How's that?
Good.
Thank you for this information.
The next person that's on that list.
Misting?
Oh, okay. There's a Richard.
Yep.
Okay. He lives in a different state. He lives in Boise. He owns the house next to me. I have an affidavit with the notary from him.
If you want to just give it to the
Yes.
clerk, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
You betcha.
Misting Eastburn? Give us your name and go ahead.
Good evening, council members. My name is Misting Eastburn. I live at 1110 Northwest 8th Court. I'm here before you because I have tried to go through code enforcement to rectify a dangerous situation. The street I live on is very narrow. The neighbor living at 1129 Northwest 8th Court is making the road even more narrow by illegally parking cars and trailers that blocks the road, make it impassable for emergency vehicles. See photo in number 1. These cars and trailers are obstructing the right-of-way and is creating a hazard because if I need an ambulance, it cannot get through. See photos 1A, 1B, and 1C. If you will kindly look at photo number 4, it is a map of the street with property lines showing where he is parking his cars in the highlighted pink area. His driveway is the highlighted yellow area. This is where he is supposed to park. Instead, he parks a travel trailer there that he lives in and parks everything else in the road. I have went and filed code violations with the code enforcement officer and was never called back. At one point, the neighbor had moved all the vehicles. I came back from vacation to find he had moved all the cars and the trailers back again. See photo number 2. This was even after my neighbor had her stove catch fire, in which the fire truck barely was able to get to her with the cars gone. See photo number 3. Now they are all back. They would not be able to squeeze through to access us. This is a disaster in the making. please don't wait for the inevitable to happen. We need no parking signs so as to stop this person from blocking our street. This is just one of the many infractions the code enforcement officer knows about and does nothing about. This person does not live in the residence, but lives in the travel trailer in the driveway where he is supposed to park the cars. This has been reported to the code enforcement. See copy number 6. Nowhere on the code does it say this is allowed, which makes this a violation, as I was told by the city planner. This neighbor also has a signage violation. See photo number 5 and 5A. How would you like to see this mess every day? I am frustrated by the lack of action that the code enforcement officer has taken. I'm here asking for assistance in the situation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Lisa Corzine?
Hello, council members. My name's Lisa Corzine, and I live at 1093 Northwest 8th Court here in Lincoln. My property is at the end of the street on 8th Court, and it was my property where the electric stove caught fire, and I had to call 911. The police got there first as the fire truck was having trouble getting up the road. It was I guess it was just a very rude awakening, thinking or realizing that morning that my whole property and home could have burnt down. If I were to have a heart attack, if I were to fall, if something or anyone on our street would have had some kind of medical emergency, what would happen? Would EMS, would the police, would the fire people, would they be able to get to us? Not at this point in Jexure when all the road is being blocked. There's to a point to where this neighbor at 1129 Northwest Court has gotten into a hoarding situation to where he is just throwing things over onto my property next door. I wake up and I see all of a sudden a hot water heater out there. I did confront. Well, he did. He removed it, and he slid it down to the city street, and that is where it is laying right now, as the pictures show. Those two trailers are unhitched. They have blocks behind them. They haven't gone anywhere, 24/7, 365 days out of a year. That man is living in that trailer. Every person on our street knows it and sees it. But yet, he has gotten away from it. I have filed 3 different reports, have walked them in myself personally. I did this last Wednesday. I was told that the code enforcer, Mr. Craig Gravenhurst, was not there, that he would contact me the next day, to which I replied, well, he has never contacted me at all on the other 2. She said it was procedured that he would. I've had no phone call, I've had no email, I've had no text, I've had nothing in the mail. I have no contact. I don't know where this is going. And to me, it's going nowhere like the end of my street. There's only one way in and one way out. That street has to be safe for everyone that lives there. I am a single professional woman. I pay my taxes. I work hard. So I would expect at least for someone to have the respect to call me back and let me know what's going on. I would like to say that, regardless if they, pay taxes or not, they're breaking the law. I follow code. I obey the law. That trailer that's parked in that driveway that he's living in needs to be moved. Those 2 trailers sitting on city roads that have gone nowhere, they need to be gone. He needs to park his cars in his designated driveway where I park mine. People have to be able to pull out of their drives, and they have to have the road to back onto to do so. Right now, they cannot. And again, it is a real safety issue. No parking signs, please, need to be labeled on that stone wall that prevents anybody from parking on the middle of the road, because that's what it ends up being. A car's here, and then you only have this much of a room to get by it. So no parking signs would just help immensely. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for coming forward. And M Parks?
I'm Marlene Parks. I live at 1160 Northwest 8th Court. And my issue is with all the parking there, but mostly because of the motor home, and now he's parked his big bright red trailer. If I open my living room drapes, the city 2 years ago cut back severely on my property because to compensate for how much of the road he was taking up, because the trucks weren't able to get through. So I lose. They put big holes in the bushes, so that left me with a gorgeous view of Research Flat Earth. I mean, all these flags, I mean, this is what my living room, when I open the drapes, I look at, and it is a code violation. I did talk to the code enforcement officer, and he told me it was legal. And they have no intention of dealing with it. So I don't know what the answer is, but it's not a very pleasant sight at the beach to look at. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thanks for coming forward. It's the right thing to do. Hear your frustration. We need to hear it. So that's the end of people who signed up. Is somebody who hasn't signed up that would like to have a comment?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, thank
Sure.
you. Fellow council members, I apologize for not signing up. My name is Byron Farley. I'm an attorney representing a small contingent that originally came here to speak on one of the matters that was subsequently removed from the agenda, which was the proposed definition here for the to the zone amendment. It was on the transitional housing. And so, again, there was a contingent here prepared to speak out against that, certainly not against transitional housing. I think everybody's in favor of that and thinks it's a wonderful thing, but to speak out against the language of the amendment itself, and then also it's putting it into the general commercial zone. The goalpost has been moved on us now tonight because that has been removed from the agenda. The city attorney has indicated, well, we don't need it. When we talk about transitional housing, it was just a label, didn't mean anything. We could have called it Bob, I think is what he said. The problem is that it does mean something. Transitional housing is a legal term of art. We submitted a written memorandum just prior that is now of record, so you all have access to it. And transitional housing is defined in the Oregon Revised Statutes. It's very specifically designed, and it gives local jurisdictions the authority to implement transitional housing. It also has other regulations that go with it. It directs that the health department has the authority to dictate certain health requirements and things of that nature. And so I guess as a preliminary matter, I'm a little bit concerned that there was a resolution that was amended during the deliberation stage when no one in the public got to comment on the now revised resolution that removed a legal term of art that may have led the public to believe that it was going to comply with the ORS provisions and all the safeguards that ensures. Transitional housing has now been removed from the resolution that was in it when it was proposed. It's now being deliberated. No one in the public got to comment on that. It's now been passed. I have concerns about whether or not the proper protocol has been followed. I think that could be the subject of some sort of appeal, whether it be LUBA or otherwise. That would cause me some concern sitting on the city council with a deal that's supposed to close in a week for $400,000 now, all based on this resolution that perhaps was amended again during the deliberation stage to remove a critical legal term of art that wasn't present initially. Again, I think there are now other issues with a lot of the other land use decisions. We talk about conditional use permit 2904. He says, well, it was transitional housing, but we're removing that. It was just a label. It didn't mean anything. Resolution 2020, it's just a label. It didn't mean anything. Again, it is a legal term of art, and folks relied on that legal term of art, what it means when either choosing not to object to it or not to make comments to it. There was basically an amendment to the conditional use permit made tonight by the city that in essence said, when we say transitional housing, we don't really mean what the Oregon Revised Statute says transitional housing is. The problem is that the conditional use permit has now been argued, it's been heard, it's been closed, it's done. And now he's telling us we don't actually mean the state definition, we mean our own thing, and we're removing transitional housing and we're just going to call it something else. Well, that's done, and that's influenced the appearance or non-appearance by a lot of people regarding those various issues of conditional use permits, the resolution, all of this stuff. So we've had the goalpost moved, definitions changed, on a major deal that Councilmember Hoagland, I think, accurately expressed some concern. This is a $400 plus $350,000 in loans. This is a $750,000 project. This is about 40% of the reserves for the city here, tied up in a resolution that was amended during the deliberations after public comment was closed, based on a series of land use decisions that have now essentially had a legal term of art thrown out way after the stage. I think it creates LUBA issues. I think it creates a whole host of issues that can tie this thing up with LUBA, with the circuit courts, for months and months and months, if not longer. And now we have a deal that's supposed to go down in a week for almost $500,000. We have a facility that has to be substantially constructed within a year. This could be tied up at LUBA. What happens if Helping Hands puts $350,000 into a facility 6 months from now and then is told that the transitional housing has to comply with the Oregon Revised Statute, and now they can't use it for the services that they intended? Are they going to come after the city? I don't know. I think there are serious things to think about. Again, the goalpost was moved on me tonight. We came in with the intent of arguing in favor of transitional housing, but against the currently proposed amendment. That has now been taken off. I think, and I'm not sure about this, but I think the council has the authority to call up a prior land use decision for good cause and reconsider it on appeal, allow new evidence and a de novo decision, even if the 10 days has expired. 10 days is there for a party to appeal, but I do believe the council has the authority to call up a conditional use permit and review it on its own. I would recommend at this point that the council at least leave. Is that my 5 minutes? Mm-hmm. Okay, I will be very brief. I would urge the council to come up with something where they at least give an opportunity to be briefed on whether or not they can call up the prior conditional use permit, so we can check its validity now that it's essentially been amended, or is otherwise now a non-conforming use because it allowed for transitional housing, which is now no longer a conditional use in the code. Reconsider all of that, and if it is going to be essentially amended, allow the folks to have a site-specific hearing on it, on the conditional use, because there were folks who intended to oppose it on the grander scale of it being in general commercial or it having particular things in the definition that they found improper. The notice on that for this was sent November 13th. Almost 2 months ago, they were notified that, hey, there's going to be a hearing on January 13th where you can come and give public comment. So a lot of folks in all the hearings that went down in December said, you know what, we can wait until the January 13th hearing to voice our objections. It's right there on the notice that was issued by planning. And now, at the 11th hour, they've removed that. They've removed the ability of a large contingent of the business community to be heard on this specific issue. So I would urge council to at least leave the record open for a period of a couple of weeks so they can be briefed on whether or not they can pull up this conditional use permit on appeal. I would probably hold off on signing the final order on the resolution, given that if that deal goes through, you're going to have a tough time. I see I'm out of time. So my last comment, if I may, Your Honor, I'd ask that the written submission be received so everyone who's identified on that is identified as a party who's appeared for purposes of appealing to LUBA. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Could I ask him a question real quick?
Who's our own attorney?
No, I was just going to ask him his name. I missed it.
Oh.
And who he's representing. I don't know who that is.
I apologize. My name is Byron Farley, and the folks of whom I represent are indicated on the written submission that was sent to planning by email, so they do have that. It is the Ashley Inn, the Lincoln Woods Apartments, Thomas Barnes, Barnes and Jitesh Desai. I believe there are other business community members who intended to appear and speak this evening as well against this, but again, that opportunity has now been removed. Thank you.
Can I ask
Thank you.
When was this submitted? When did you submit this to our planning?
I believe it was submitted via email. I would say my staff did it while I was driving over here from Salem. I'd say about 4 o'clock or 4:30.
Today?
Yes. And I have written copies that I'll offer as well as soon as I'm away from the microphone. Thank you.
All right.
Council, if I may, I just want to point out that in the context of a land use ordinance that's being processed to the city council, you cannot bring a collateral attack on a prior unappealed land use decision. Again, the conditional use approval went through the process as I described earlier. You can't attack it in a public hearing for a land use ordinance. In addition, you can't basically in a land use ordinance public hearing ex parte the city council after the close of the record on a decision to dispose of real property under 221-725. Again, the hearing had closed, the record had closed. We weren't going to hear from anyone else. You can't hear from someone on that issue as part of a land use ordinance that happens to be on the same agenda. In this case, council's communication, which was on directed to the land use ordinance, which we pulled, addressed those other matters, and as such was inappropriate. And again, you just can't bring challenges to prior unappealed decisions as part of something else. The modifications to the resolution were to address the fact that, in fact, the use that was approved was the use that was applied for, and adding a label to it from, frankly, the application that was approved was not an application for transitional housing as applied under that ORS4, whatever section that he was referenced. So that's why we made it clear that what was applied for and what was advertised was what was approved.
Thank you. All right, we have, another comment? I thought, oh, sorry to.
I'm one of the, my name's Thomas Barnes. I came here from California to attend this meeting, to talk to the item that was pulled off of the agenda. And I just gave a handout that pretty much states my objection. I guess what I would say is this. There seems to be a lot of confusion regarding this issue. There seemed to be confusion among all of you, actually, when you were discussing it. And the notices, you sent out notices back in November 19th and 20th, and they were ambiguous. We were led to believe that we could come and talk to this publicly on today's date, actually. But you approved the CUP on the 3rd, and so we're here to discuss it on the 17th, only to find that it was pulled from the agenda. I must say that I'm impressed with the legal counsel that we have advising us on this matter. And I would just caution you to make sure that you are on sound grounds as you proceed with this. We feel that we've been misled. We went out and actually canvassed the community. We knocked on doors. We talked to business owners. We talked to property owners. We found that almost all of them knew nothing about this, number one. Number two, we found out that the vast majority were opposed to it. I think if you would take the time to go out and get some public comments yourself, that you would find that that would be true. So, as our attorney has stated, and I think he stated it pretty clearly, the game has changed. You changed the game today when you took the item off of the agenda, which we were led to believe we could object to and be heard to and make our points, which, according to your city manager right now, which I really question, that's irrelevant. That doesn't make any difference because you have approved the CUP, and it just doesn't really make any difference what the public thinks at this point because you've approved that. Well, I beg to differ, and that's the reason why we have retained a legal firm to represent us. So I'm just not even going to get into what's in my letter other than to say I would caution you to make sure that you are on firm legal standing when you go along with what it is that you are trying to push through the city council. You didn't do it properly. We weren't notified properly. Nobody knew about it. We expected to be able to come here and voice our objections today. I traveled all the way from California to be here to state those objections. You come in, you change the ground rules, you pull it, you change definitions, you pass it, even though there was confusion and opposition among yourselves. So, I've said my piece. You've met our attorney. I think that if I were you, I would listen to what he has to say, and if nothing more, I would certainly have your legal representation consult with our firm because this is a serious matter. We own a $10 million complex right down 200 feet from this. We have 150 children living in this complex. We have 80 families living in this complex. The school bus picks these kids up right by the proposed location that you're trying to put this transitional housing in that you're not even sure what you mean by transitional housing because it doesn't fit the definition anymore of transitional housing. We are concerned about the health and safety of the people in the community, and particularly the people that are in our complex that are 200 feet away from this use that you're going to put in there you're not even clear on, and you don't know how you're going to vet these people. You're just not clear. So I strongly object to this. You've heard my objection. We are going to go forward with this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. You left a copy, did you, with the clerk? Thank you.
Council, just for your information and clarification, the document submitted by the attorney was part of a land use application which has been withdrawn. It is not in the record of the CUP. It is not in the record of the 221-725 disposition. It's not. As with the letter that you just received, this is not in the record of either one of those proceedings.
We're still under public comment, though, so please.
Everyone. I am Jitesh Desai, and I'm the owner of the Ashley Inn, right there on 101. I'd just like to reiterate a lot of what Mr. Barnes had said. One of the main concerns and one of the main things that has come out of this is that talking to other business owners, and I know it's, we've had these dates with the notices, but talking amongst a lot of the immediate owners in the vicinity, the communication has really been that we were not aware that we could have formal objection up until this point here. So that notice that went out, there was a lot of confusion in it. And you can speak to, I've got business cards collected between Friday and today of all these individuals, managers and owners of these businesses that state that we did not know that we could formally object to all of this. So I just want to say that the communication, however it came across, it could have been construed in many different ways, but I can tell you that these businesses simply were not able to voice their opinions. So, in essence, the business that we have a hotel. The facility where you're trying to put this housing facility sits on an elevated site. The elevated site, of course, there's going to be concerns with this type of facility with safety, cleanliness. Those things, when you put that right between an apartment complex and a hotel that has a pool area that is at a lower elevation where folks can look in through the windows and see women and children, it's a concern. So you guys should consider that. Surely 101 and its frontage and the commercial corridor that it is, and it's the face of Lincoln City, you're putting a facility like this there. I've seen many times where I've walked along Highway 101 and I've seen folks with shopping carts, and yes, I truly believe there should be a facility, but maybe it shouldn't be the face of Lincoln City on 101. And you're spending so much money. third of your reserves. And we don't know where the economy's going in the future here, so I'm just letting you know that from a business standpoint, that's a good chunk of money. But that's something that you folks can decide. But anyways, that's my formal objection, and yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Has anyone else got comments? Please. Get you on the record. Come up to the.
John Hoshar.
No, get down. They can't pick you up to you.
Gotcha.
There you go.
John Hoshar.
John Upshaw. Okay.
Me and 4 of my grandchildren live on Northeast 34th. The only street that goes right by the facility to the bus stop of which you're speaking. I found out about this in a newspaper article not too long ago saying that it was approved. That was my notification. Me and the 77 units in our complex had no clue until we read the paper. Front page. That's how I was notified. My concern is with all of our children walking by this place, can you guarantee to me it's going to be safe for them? I can get that guarantee from you that my children that walk by there every day are not going to see anything, hear anything, or be subject to anything that could do them harm, then, you know, I have no objections. But its location is very precarious for me as a family person, and that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much for coming forward. Anyone else that would like to make a comment? Hearing none, we can then move to an audit.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to introduce Tim Gillette from our audit firm, Talbot, Cavola, and Warwick. Did I get that right? We always call him TKW. He's been here a couple years, a couple different years, so some of you that have been here a while may recognize him, and he's here to talk about our audit and how it went, and also answer any questions you might have.
As you start, I apologize for the lateness. You know, one never knows how council meetings go, and I'm also remembering, and maybe incorrectly, that you always seem to come, you know, with lousy weather, you know, snow, rain, storms.
I will admit, Mr. Mayor, I was watching the weather report today, and I wasn't sure if I was coming or not. But, fortunately, it wasn't bad on the drive over. I hope the drive back won't be
I'm
bad
glad you
either.
came.
We'll
Thank
see.
you. And I apologize again for the lateness.
Well, hi, everybody. I am Tim Gillette, partner with Talbot, Corvola, and Warwick. You did get that right, Debbie.
Okay.
We call it TKW as well. In fact, we finally been able to register that name with the state. It was previously owned by somebody else for a while. So, but you can call us TKW, and we're fine. Happy to be here again. See some familiar faces, a few new faces as well. This is the report on your annual audit. It is a big document. I understand you have it on the website, not a paper copy in front of you. So I'm hopeful that each of you has read all 120 pages in great detail. I'm only going to hit the very, very high points. Most of this document is really Debbie and her staff putting this together. We audit it and issue our opinion on it. The independent auditor's report, well, it takes several pages for us to say it, but what it says is, in our opinion, the financial statements are fairly presented. So this is the official term is the unmodified auditor's report. It used to just be called a clean opinion or our good housekeeping seal of approval on the financial statements. If you're actually in the document, our report's followed by management's discussion and analysis. I always encourage everybody, if they're not going to read everything in great detail, they should read the MD&A because it has a lot of very useful information, including some comparative information that aren't in the basic financial statements themselves. That's followed by the basic financials. I'm not going to talk about these other than if you have questions, always happy to answer questions. I'll say the good news this year is there were no big changes in the accounting rules this year, unlike last year we had the other post-employment benefit obligations, and a couple of years ago we had the pension stuff. So I mean, there have been a lot of changes for a few years. This year everything stayed the same for once.
And that's GASB's fault, not ours.
Yeah, yes, that's
Just to
not
clarify.
your fault. It's also not our fault. We don't make the rules. We just follow them. So I guess I'm going to skip all the way to the back of the document. Really, is our other report, which is the report our work performed in accordance with Oregon state regulations. The state asks us to look at a number of different things, and there's a list of them. They're bullet pointed. The good news is we didn't have any real issues with any of those things. We do have to call out a couple of over expenditures that are listed in the report, none of which I would consider to be significant, but that's me. The report does reference a letter that we issued with regards to suggestions for improvements in internal control.
Tim, could I interrupt you at that right
Sure,
there
Dick.
rather than wait?
Mr.
But
Mayor,
I did see the calling out of over expenditures, but is that a timing issue? Because normally we do a supplemental budget. So is that a result of us not doing a supplemental budget
We
prior
did.
to the audit?
We did do supplemental budget at the end of June, and some of the things on here I actually did do a supplemental budget for. So, for example, the building department expenditures, I knew it was going to be over. I just underestimated how over it was going to be. And some of it I just wasn't aware of until after year end, and you can't do a budget transfer after June 30th. And so if you're processing invoices in July, you're kind of out of luck.
So yes, you could have taken care of it with supplemental budget if you had.
If we had known.
Known, yeah.
Okay.
The amounts involved were like
Yeah.
less than 1.5% of the individual line items, so we're not talking big numbers here. In our, as I said, in our suggestions for internal control, we did call out that reviews should be more timely. Multiple instances of untimely review led to a few instances where things were misclassified or reported in the incorrect period, and Debbie will work on those. There's also a letter to those charged with governance that there's a list of things that we have to communicate with you under professional standards. There's really not anything real exciting in the letter this year. We tell you to look at the estimates that are in the financial statements. We list some of those. We talk about probably the biggest thing is the recently issued accounting standards. There are some things coming down the pike. Fiduciary activities goes into effect the year we're currently in, but it's not really a big thing. The big one will be leases, if the city is involved in any leases one way or another. The accounting for those does change a lot, but it's not this year, it's the next year. So just be aware of that and ready for that.
I think that will have an impact on us because the term leases is more broad than what I generally consider a lease. It's not like buying a copier on a lease. It's a lot more broad, and we do have some things that are going to affect us. So,
Yeah, it is true. It doesn't have to be called a lease to be a lease under the definitions. So that's really all my report. Like I say, I'm happy to answer questions, but I've tried to keep it brief, as that's usually what I find the board wants.
Councilors, any questions? Councilor?
I just want to give Debbie another opportunity because we did talk about her audit, or the audit that was that included the Urban Renewal District, Urban Renewal Agency, which we covered, and I had the same comment then as I do now. First of all, I want to say good work again, very, very nice. But just want to give you an opportunity, Debbie, to talk about the timely review and how you're going to fix it.
Yeah,
for next
yeah.
year.
The one comment that was in there about the timely review that I see it a little differently. We did have an issue this year where we had invoices that were not posted into the correct fiscal year. Normally, almost all of our invoices that are processed in July get posted back to June, and this has happened year after year after year after year. And I did not have a detailed review process on that because it happened year after year and it was very reliable. This year something happened, and we had quite a few invoices in July that got processed to July that should not have. So that's actually a change I'm going to need to make to review that more carefully in the future. The one item that is listed that I would have the most concern with, and I think I need to address first off, is the fuel cards that we use. That refers to having some kind of a mechanism in place that you can validate the fuel cards are only being used for city cars and not other cars, and that we don't have that right now. And I think I see that as the biggest issue in this comment. And then the other one is just more of a timing. And they do get reviewed, and if there are errors, they do get fixed. It's just when it happens before the audit starts. But they'd like it sooner. So I'm going to try to look for a technological solution to this, such as having an online approval of the journal entries as they happen. But I'd like to come back with a real solid solution because it has been on here more than once or twice.
Other questions? Any of the councilors? Is that
Mr. Mayor, and I'm foggy about the whole process, but I'm just wondering, do these issues maybe reflect staff training or new staff, or are there possibly best practices that an auditor could advise us on that maybe we're not employing or something like that?
I think for me, it's a prioritization issue. If you post an entry with the wrong signs and you catch it 2 months later instead of 1 month later, I'm not nearly concerned about that as I am with accurate payroll, not paying an invoice twice, which would get my attention a lot quicker. It's just, just to be blunt about it, it's just low on my priority list because it does get done and it gets fixed. We're not talking about cash going out the door. It's stuff that's really. It's just a correction to an entry where you post something to a wrong department, so you move it. It's not creating issues. So I've just haven't made it enough of a priority, and also the process is not conducive to me getting it done because it's out of sight. It's not in any queue somewhere for me to look at. It's not reminding me that there's nothing reminding me that I need to do it. The other issue is that we'll go 6 months without closing because we're working on the audit, and so by the time the audit's done, I'm already 6 months behind. So those are kind of the reasons. So, but I recognize if it's important enough to be talked about in a public forum, I need to. I'm getting tired of getting beat up on it. How's that?
So I was going to ask Tim if he was, ready to, acknowledge or, agree with Debbie.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, that there are degrees of the recommendations we make. There's the worst thing is if you have a material weakness that we would report, and that would mean we found a problem with the system, either the way it was designed or the way it's being operated that we thought could cause a material misstatement in the financial statements. That was not this. This is the next level down, which we call a significant deficiency. It's something that Debbie will address, and I'm happy with her approach to addressing it.
Good. Anyone else? Comments, thoughts? Christmas card message you want to send? Tim, thank you for delivering the message and doing the audit. Appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you very much for having us. Great to be back here again. I shouldn't say this, Mr. Mayor, but I've been watching the score and the Tigers are
No,
ahead.
don't. Don't. I was going to tell you that your staff was very much appreciated, but now I'm a little concerned.
Mr. Mayor, if you'd like, we can put out our auditing services to bid.
Yeah, we've got to talk about it. Thank you. Safe drive.
Is that unanimous consent to put out the audit services?
All right. We have, we have a public hearing then for supplemental budget. Right? So, next on the,
Yes, so we have a supplemental budget on the agenda tonight. Supplemental differs from a budget transfer, and in this case, in its size, there's a couple items on here that change the budget more than 10%, and so that requires a public hearing. There's actually quite a few items on here. I don't know if you'd like me to go through them or just answer questions.
what's the flavor of the council? Do you have questions? Did they make sense?
I had
Did
questions.
you look at them?
Read every one of them.
Okay.
You know, it's such exciting reading material.
Yeah.
I even highlighted something, so I did.
The, I guess always the question, supplemental means we're changing the budget, moving money around or recognizing. So it's always fun to ask, you know, what if we didn't approve the supplemental budget? You know, Tim would be back complaining or in your next audit?
We wouldn't be doing some of the things on here. So,
Okay.
so for example, let me pull up my resolution. Sorry, wrong, too many papers. So like, in street capital, we have a couple $100,000 for Southwest, for overlay of, I'm sorry, the proposal is to reallocate that funding to the Lincoln Square ADA improvement. So if you didn't wish to approve this supplemental budget, then we wouldn't be doing that project. There's a couple ODOT agreement projects in here that is being primarily paid for by ODOT with some match on the city part. Again, that if the supplemental budget's not approved, then we would not be able to do those projects unless you want to go over budget and be illegal. That answer your question?
And you're moving the money for PERS, the PERS match.
Yeah.
I mean, that stands out.
Yeah, the PERS one is in here. There's some rollovers from last year. There's a couple ODOT projects. There's the Southeast 48th retaining wall, which is again as a rollover. A lot of it's rollover.
It was really, you know, going through it with your comments down below and stuff, it certainly helps in the staff report.
There are a couple items on here too that they don't actually change the budget because it's taking money out of a capital reserve and using it into a capital project, but it's still a capital outlay. But I did note them in the staff report because I don't like changing anything in the budget without it going through council. And that's the facilities capital plan is one issue, that moving $400,000 from capital reserves to another capital line. One kind of I think is exciting thing in here is the PD K-9 program. As you probably know, they've started a fundraiser for that some time ago, and they have raised the $60,600 that they needed to start that program. So that request is in here to add that. I think that would be kind of cool.
So I was going to ask about that.
K-9 dog, by the way, is a fixed asset.
I was the impression that it was closer to the 75,000. Are your numbers current?
They're the numbers I asked PD probably about 3 months ago for their estimates, and That's what
So
I
I
have,
thought-
and that's what we're changing the budget by, so if it's not enough, we'll.
Oh. Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, Pat.
So we may have another small change of this towards the end of the year if it causes a budget issue, perhaps.
Great. Okay. Yep, please, Counselor.
I was wondering, and this is, part of my long-term education process, so when I think of contingency, it's money sort of set aside that it's there if we need it for a special thing, and think of like green, yellow, red, there's a real healthy contingency level, there's a moderate contingency level, and there's a contingency level that's below what it should be. So if we're moving money out of the contingency and reducing it, where are we now?
Can I respond to that? So a better term to use is fund balance. And the fund balance is split into two parts. There is the unappropriated fund balance and the appropriated fund balance. The unappropriated fund balance we have established, and they both combine to make the fund balance. In the unappropriated fund balance, we have set policies on the minimum level that we want that to be. So, for example, in the general fund, it is $6 million. Anything above that $6 million becomes part of your appropriated fund balance, or what we would call a contingency. Those are for the unexpected items that may or may come up, or as we saw tonight, priorities that play out that didn't get put into the budget at the time. And so when we are looking at what is the fund balance we really don't want to go below, it's that $6 million, because that's your rainy day fund. Now, the actions that you're seeing with these changes is it's dropping it in this resolution down from $2 million to $1.3 million. That does affect your ability to handle other unexpected expenses, cost overruns, and things like that you run into, or carrying over into the next year to be included in your budget discussion.
So I'm sorry, the 2 million, that's above the 6?
That's above the 6. Our total fund balance that we had budgeted for this year was $8 million. And really what you're saying is, of that, $2 million is your contingency. The other $6 million is the amount that we wanted to maintain as our real rainy day fund.
And this resolution that we just passed to spend $400,000 on the transit, that was actually part of the budget.
It was. Again, the thing to remember is that your budget is made up of multiple funds. So the $750,000 that you approved, $400,000 of that came out of the Capital Facilities Fund, and we had $1.19 million, I think it was, in that in reserve for future years. In that fund, we wanted to maintain at least $600,000 for which is essentially the equivalent of the cost to pay the next year's police building debt. And so we wanted to maintain that. The $400,000 came out of that. The $350,000 that you were looking at for the loan came from the general fund contingency. So again, when you're looking at these funds, it's important to remember that although they make up all of the city funds, they are self-balancing sets of accounts that are made to stand independent of the rest of them.
Okay. You all right? That helps. Good refresher. Other questions? Any on the? Then I'll call for, it's a hearing, right?
Yes, we do need to do public.
So if any public member wishes to come forward and talk to us about the supplemental hearing, I see and hear none. So do we close take a motion to close the hearing and the record?
I will move that we close the hearing and the record on
The supplemental
Public
budget?
hearing supplement, this is on the supplemental budget.
Second.
We have a second from Mr. Parsons. Motion to close. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed with a nay? Hearing none, thank you. We have an ordinance, ordinance 2020-01.
Council, this is first reading of ordinance number 2020-01, an ordinance amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title 15, Buildings and Construction, Chapter 1504, Adoption and Enforcement of Construction and Construction-Related Codes, to remove the adoption by reference of the 1997 Uniform Housing Code and the 1997 Uniform Sign Code. Ask for approval of first reading. In explanation, the planning director requested that we remove these two codes because they're no longer administered by her department.
Who does?
Yes.
Make a motion to approve first reading of ordinance 2020-01.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion to approve with a second. Any discussion?
We basically don't use the 1997 Housing Code, and we don't use the 1997 Sign Code.
So they're just not in
this-
use, okay.
Yeah, we have other regulations we use instead of those. This just eliminates some redundant and old regulations.
Good to hear. Roll call then? No, any further questions? Roll call, please.
Casper?
Yes.
Hinton?
Yes.
Hoagland?
Yes.
Coos?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Parsons?
Yes.
And Anderson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Your Honor, Council, this is second reading of ordinance number 2020-01, an ordinance amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title 15, Buildings and Construction, Chapter 1504, Adoption and Enforcement of Construction and Construction-Related Codes, to remove the adoption by reference of the 1997 Uniform Housing Code and the 1997 Uniform Sign Code.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
make a motion to approve second reading and adopt ordinance 2020-01.
Second.
We have a second from Councilor Mark. Motion to approve second reading. Roll call, please.
Hinton?
Yes.
Hoagland?
Yes.
Coos?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Parsons?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
And Casper?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you very much. We have resolution 2020-01. This is on the supplemental budget that you just heard and they had the public hearing on. Is there a motion to approve?
Mayor, I'll move that we approve resolution 2020-01, the supplemental budget.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the resolution with a second from Councilor Parsons. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Hoagland?
Yes.
Coos?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Parsons?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Casper?
Yes.
And Hinton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. Down to item 12 under L, special order of business, the request for appointment to Parks and Recreation Board. We have two applicants, and I understand one position. Councilor Hinton and Coos, you did the interviewings.
Yes.
You want to share with us? Obviously, you couldn't make a decision.
Deanna and I both interviewed David Jameson. Is it David Jameson? And we did Megan too, back when she was applying for both. She applied for both the Parks and Rec and to Explore Lincoln City. And she was appointed to Explore Lincoln City. But when this position came open, then we put her application in.
So we didn't re-interview her. We just interviewed her the first time. And then we met with David, and I had never met David before, and I was very impressed. 4.5 years here. He has a wealth of experience and knowledge in the field. He is previously on the board and would like to maintain that. He is an active participant and only missing one meeting, which was only because it got changed. But he's very involved, like I said, very knowledgeable, and would like to continue that. And I was very impressed with him.
Right. So your recommendation then would be David Jameson, is that?
I would, because Megan is on Explore Lincoln City, and I think she does a great job. I think she'd do a good job on either one. But since she's already there, we don't want to put too much on her.
Okay. So,
So
the
do I
motion
go ahead
would
and make
be
a move?
to recommend.
I move to appoint David Jameson to the Parks and Recreation Board with a term expiring 12/31/2022.
And I would second that.
We have a motion with a second. Any other questions from? So all those in favor with an aye?
Aye.
And opposed with a nay? Hearing none? Thank you. And we have some proposed annual meeting dates, one with the county. Choose between 3 dates, and this is our annual joint meeting with the county commissioners. And then the other with the Confederated Tribes of Siletz. That'd be July 13th. You want to put on your calendar. I think we would be hosting in July. Yep.
Would that be in place of our regular city council meeting?
No, this is an hour meeting. It's a Wednesday, is it right?
No, the Confederated Tribes.
Oh, I'm
Monday,
sorry.
the 13th.
Yeah, so it's the odd Monday, yeah. But we'd be hosting here.
No, but it's not the
Oh, it's not, oh, it's not the odd Monday.
It's the second Monday. July 13th is the second Monday.
Oh, we got a problem there.
That was my one question.
Yep. No, it's a good one. I didn't look at the calendar.
While she's looking that up, I would just like to say for the County Board of Commissioners joint meeting,
Yep.
My preference would be July 1st. The other two are pretty iffy.
The other are pretty iffy?
Iffy.
Iffy.
For me.
Okay.
I'm agreeable to any of those dates for the
Doesn't matter
Board
to
of
me.
Commissioners.
So, is the first all right then?
Yeah.
Everybody, all right? Works. So let's do the 1st of August, or July 1st for the county,
What time would that be?
6 o'clock
Here?
here.
6.
There-
Mayor,
there-
would you like me to try to get a off
Yeah,
meeting date for,
that would be good.
I'll
Yeah.
work with him.
So we'll come back on the Confederated Tribes.
But preferably it wouldn't be the 15th or the 29th.
All right, so first. All right, we have then city manager report.
I have 2 items. One is just some really exciting news to share with you, and then the other is a question.
Okay.
The quarterly city council newsletter has been such a success, the one that we have been mailing out, that we are now set up to do a monthly email newsletter. And we have, or e-newsletter, I guess is what I should call it. We've already posted that we plan on going forward with this. It's on Channel 4. We've sent out flyers. We've done Ron's report. It's on the website. And we are starting to get people who are requesting to receive copies of that. So we will be contacting you a little more frequently on things that you would like to put into the newsletter as we send it out on a monthly basis. I need to point out, send it out electronically on a monthly basis, quarterly still on a paper basis. The other is a question for you. Your priority meeting is scheduled for February 3rd. It is a public meeting. It will be held at the community college. Last year during our budget committee discussions, there was some questions about how you established your priorities and how those priorities came into the budget, especially since we specifically mentioned this is how the budget reflects your priorities. And so the question I have is, would you like me to extend an invitation to the budget committee? We're not extending an invitation to anybody else.
Yeah.
This would just be special.
As a participant or just?
No,
to-
no.
just
You are the only
witness?
participants. It would just to be as an observer.
Well, if it's open to the public anyway, I don't know. I think they have the opportunity to come already. I don't know.
But I would say go ahead and let them know we're having it. But if you wouldn't mind something that, as observing, not as
Yes.
part of the discussion. I think that's often the
Yep,
confusion.
I will make sure I do that then.
And what time?
9 to 1.
9 to 1. On the 3rd of February?
Yeah, on a Monday. We're trying to keep you any extra meetings you have on Mondays.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Appicello, do you have anything you'd want to bring forth?
Well,
No lectures on LUBA and legal cases.
you don't want to hear about
No,
the Luba
I
case?
don't.
Okay, so you had a gentleman come to you under public discussion. He was an attorney, and he made these arguments relative to something that you had just done. I could give you my feelings about that now in open session, or we could go to an executive session clearly under 192-662H, potential litigation. So I could do that here in open session. I can tell you what I think of some of his arguments. Probably best that we talk about that in executive session. But in the end, we have a closing in a week. Regardless of the strength or weakness of arguments that are being made or threats that are being made of litigation, we have a closing in a week. So if you want to skip the discussion, I think an appropriate motion might be to authorize the city manager to extend the closing date and pay whatever appropriate additional earnest money would be necessary to do that. And I'll tell you from experience, I had a person in Ashland who filed, I think, 7 appeals. Was never successful, but they filed 7 appeals. And one of those appeals had to do with, oh, you misled me and on what the application was. And, well, she lost, and because LUBA said, if you're interested in a land use application, the notice is intended to get you to come in and look at the planning department file. Because you know what's going to happen? Things are going to change. During the process, things are going to evolve, and you got to go look at what the application is in order to know what is being proposed. So, but that doesn't mean that she didn't waste a lot of my time in a LUBA case. Actually, it was my assistant that dealt with that one. But so you might want to consider, if you don't want to go into executive session right now and go into more detail, you might want to just, and Ron may have already been delegated this responsibility or authority, but I think it would be prudent to just delegate to Ron the ability to make a decision if we can. Continue closing and pay whatever additional earnest money might be necessary in order to wait and see if we do get any kind of litigation.
Councilor Mark?
Yeah, thanks. It kind of goes to a question I had, which was, they had an opportunity, these objectors had an opportunity to object to the Planning Commission decision to approve the conditional use permit. No one did that. So does that mean that they exhausted their remedy at that point?
Mr. Mayor, before that's answered, I really think these kind of questions should be done in an executive session when it's not on public record.
Okay. So why don't we move to executive session then, if that would be all right? And because we don't have, a time frame. We're under a time frame to make some steps. So could you, before we do?
Before you do that, we have a little announcement here by City Council. Could I just say something, so in case we come back, everybody's in bed and dreaming?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll come back and say good night, right? Okay. I just wanted to report that I've been on the SWAC committee, Sustainable Waste Advisory Board Committee, since February of 2017, and we've been working on the materials management plan. And it seems to me it's kind of pertinent that I bring this up because I see a cohesive uniting here for our sustainability committee. And recently, at the last meeting, there were 4 items that were brought up, and I mentioned them to this in my notes. One was about plastic upcycling, where there's a gentleman looking to do testing for materials made of plastic, all plastic except PVC, which lasts 3 times longer, and it costs $5,000 more per mile. It's an additive put to the asphalt. It makes up 6% of the composition of the asphalt. So an impartial study is being done. He's trying to get money to do this. The ODOT is interested. Other countries, 12 other countries have used it. DEQ had questions about if it was going to contaminate or leach into the ground, and tests from other countries, and I think Georgia's using it, say no, it doesn't. So he is pursuing avenues to find this, and Gomberg and Arnie Roblin, we're going to bring it to the legislature so that this project could be expanded to the whole state, not just Lincoln County. So that's good news as to what to do with cycling. There's a continuation of the green schools. That's a number 3 project on our list. And let me see, I'll just go through the quick ones. The Lincoln County Recycling Guide. I know our Sustainability Committee is wondering about how to reach people. That's been assigned to a subcommittee, how to reach every resident, tourist versus resident, how to get the message out about reduce and reusing, so there's even money in the budget to do that. The other discussion was on composting, and this subject has come up before us before, and I remember in May I talked to you about approving the plan for adoption to the County Commission, and we did that in June of 2019. And at that time I mentioned that the 4 goals of the SWAC were public education, countywide green schools, organic recovery recycling, and household hazardous waste events. So after that time, I know that North Lincoln Sanitary was contacted to see if there was some kind of a program, and North Lincoln said, well, we're ready to present to you anytime. And then I know in September, North Lincoln met with a representative here of the city and shared some information and said they'd be ready to present to us about some ideas for curbside composting. Then November 4th, 2019, we had a special work session, as you all remember because you were there, and it was in response to the Sustainability Committee request to define what we meant by zero waste and to bring into focus what the council would like to be accomplished. And so at that time, Tina French from North Lincoln presented her program, recovery program. We all had copies of that. And so as far as I know, nothing still has happened, and we're the only city in the county that doesn't have a curbside recycling program. I have in my possession resolutions from Newport, Seaside, and Cannon Beach. So I think if we want to share information with the Sustainability Committee, the first thing we could do is make the materials plan available on the city website. I know I looked down there and there's no way you could possibly find it, but I think it would be helpful for all those interested in environmental aspects to see what the county is doing, because they're doing a lot, to make that available. The other one would be to email copies to all of the people on the Sustainability Committee And then maybe to invite local SWAC members and North Lincoln Sanitary to meet with the Sustainability Committee once in a while for questions. But tonight I'd like to suggest that we consider a resolution regarding Organics Recovery Program and to bring it up for discussion as soon as possible. We've waited so long for this, and we've never done anything, so if we could maybe create a resolution and then have a discussion, I think it would be a direction to move. So I would propose, I make a motion that the council direct staff to bring a resolution for an Organics Recovery Program for discussion as soon as possible.
Second.
So there's a motion to direct staff to come up with a resolution. So I'm just asking, is there do you have some samples to go by?
Yeah,
Oh,
I just
okay.
said I have Seaside, Cannon Beach,
I thought
and
those were
Newport.
were those composting,
Curbside composting resolutions, yes.
is that what you're talking about?
Yes. We have wood waste and food
You
waste.
said organic, you said organic.
Organic recovery, that's what I mean.
Okay,
Wood and food.
Okay.
If it's green, it goes.
okay.
And there's been
If
a
it's
lot of,
orange.
a lot of success in Newport. They're not doing commercial right now. They do have a pilot project with 15 restaurants, and they're charging residential rates because they know these 15 restaurants will not commingle the products. And I know North-
Tina kind of talked about that too. She'd like to handpick.
Yeah,
some-
and I think North Lincoln, Tina, has some ideas that, and some flexibility that would be very appealing to us.
So, and that helps, so thank you, trying to get clarification. The other part of the motion was as soon as possible. Does that mean before styrofoam?
No,
Yeah,
that's
or does that before a tree ordinance, or does that,
By March, by the first meeting in March.
or, because I don't remember the list of, that long list of things we've got, and so what I'd hoped to do in 2020 is before we keep dumping, turn to staff and say, do we have a list of the things we wished we could either have on a work session or come, and so either prioritize, because quite honestly, I and the city manager take heat from our commitments, as loose as they might be, to not getting to them because other ones come on top. So, and I think we've had the discussion how easy one thing is and floats forward, other things get pushed down. So all I'm not even talking to the issue, I'm just trying to keep
Understand.
us from keep adding to a list and not prioritizing it.
So, Mr. Mayor, last week's, or the week before, the weekly report, I gave you some information on the priorities. This week, I'll provide you with the other things that we have as well that have come up through the course of the year. So you'll have a complete list by the end of this week.
So, and as we take action on this, this was to bring forth a resolution, so there's plenty of time. But I would hope that we maybe could look at that list and prioritize it, and then have you being staff, tell us what we could expect. Rather than jamming you up, look at them, say we could do these two in a month.
Okay.
This is going to take longer, but
We do have, with some of them, actually with most of them, we have some deadlines associated with them. Anything that has to do with Planning Commission has already got scheduled dates on it, and so I'll provide as much information as I have to give.
I just think it's important that we know as we ask for this, when we can expect it back, and then holds us all accountable.
And I would add to that, which is what I was going to talk about tonight, an ordinance that bans all to-go containers that are made of polystyrene, which is styrofoam, and all plastic clamshell to-go containers. There's a long list I know that the Sustainability Committee has been talking about, but talking about priorities, let's get this going, and maybe a draft ordinance could be delivered to the committee to review and make recommendations to us, but can we,
Well, the Sustainability Committee is scheduled to present to you on February 10th, on what their recommendations are. Now, if you are directing the Sustainability Committee to do this, I mean, that's one thing. If you're asking them to consider this as part of their recommendation, they may come back with it and say yes or no, or here it is modified. So a little bit depends upon what you would actually ask of the Sustainability Committee. Because in our discussions, their recommendations are not going to follow exactly with what you have been discussing. They have other ideas that they've been pursuing as well.
I'm aware of that, but this is one that we've talked about, I don't know, and it's important, if we want to, like a little poll of how many of us want to see this move forward, let's do that. I mean, hands up down there, hands up down here, maybe.
Mr. Mayor?
Well,
We're in like another motion of a motion.
yeah.
Oh,
That's good-
sorry.
Good point.
So sorry.
We'll come
But
So anyway, the motion on the table is just to have staff bring back a resolution or recommendation, or you've got some samples.
I do.
And that Councilor Casper, pardon?
Do we need a motion for that, or can we? She made a motion.
Yeah, I understand.
Well, yeah, I think it's important to have the motion because that way the council is saying, yes, we want to use staff time. Any other, because what Ron will do, that Ron, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you'll take a look and let us know of when the expectation of that could be back.
Yeah, I'll include, if you pass the motion, I'll include this with all of the others, and it'll be to you by the end of the week.
That'd be great.
And could we also send forth the materials management plan to the Sustainability Committee? I think that will give them a lot of clarity about so they don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Excuse me.
So, okay.
I just got a question.
Okay.
I think the environmental stuff seems to be a priority for some of us, a lot of us. Wouldn't it make more sense to hear from the Sustainability Committee before we have our priority setting meeting, if this is going to come up in our priority setting meeting?
This is also a priority in the county. This is a regional priority, this specific one.
I look at them as like a recommendation.
I do too,
After
but
the
they
fact,
want us to
we
hear.
have these kind of two things separate. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but this has been years now that
Oh,
we're
yeah,
trying
I know.
to get this going.
They're not scheduled to meet again until the 28th, the day after your next meeting. Is there any way we could push it up? We can try to push it up and have their presentation on the 28th.
Would it be possible to invite them to our meeting like you were talking about, budget? They could just say what they need to real quick and that be their piece?
Yeah,
No?
that-
Okay.
yeah, that
Just-
break, yeah, we'd get in.
That's why I asked.
No, good idea, though.
We'll see if we can move their meeting up.
Okay.
They have their presentation on the 27th.
So the motion on the table, again, a reminder, is to resolution or whatever, direct staff to bring back something for us to review on organic? Would that be the right term?
Organic recovery.
Organic recovery. Okay. Any objections? Hearing none? All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. And now, your styrofoam,
Yeah, actually, thanks to Mr. Hoagland down there, he corrected me. It's called polystyrene instead of styrofoam. And then the plastic clamshell to-go containers, all these that are used to go.
so what do you,
I would like to see an ordinance to ban all of these to-go containers that are made of polystyrene and all plastic clamshell to-go containers.
by chance, do you have a sample that you like?
No, but I can tell you that the cities of San Jose, California has had one since 1980, San Francisco, New York City, the states of Maine, Maryland, Hawaii,
Okay, so
and, wait for it, and in Oregon.
close to Oregon?
Oregon, I'm getting there. Shh.
It's
And in-
9:05.
shh. And in Oregon, bands include Portland since the 1980s, Silverton,
So-
Milwaukee, Florence, Ashland.
Okay. Could you give your paper to staff? So a little guidance there
I
would
can
be helpful.
Send this, who wants it? Who gets this?
I would try the
Is that
city
a
manager.
unanimous decision, or is that a motion?
Um,
Well, I had made it
Well,
as
we've
a
already
motion.
got, styrofoam's already on the list. I mean, so this would
Clamshells
just be
too?
some additional information.
You would,
might
if I could get your
speed
list,
it
that would be
along.
great.
I'll email it to you.
That would help.
Okay,
Okay, wait, before we go.
to
Because-
executive session.
Yes, because I'm hoping I can.
Your Honor, if you're done, I'll read what.
No, we're not, we've got one more. Hold on.
I had this, I just wanted to ask permission, if it's approval from you guys. I'd like to work with the Emergency Preparedness Coordinator, Ken Murphy, on developing a public involvement plan for building awareness regarding the caches, their location, list of supplies, and how to access them in the time of disaster. And I would like, council is okay to do this, and would like to ask Councilors Coos and Mark from Wards 2 and 3 to join me.
Let me first, before you guys turn to the manager and ask about interaction, staff, and 3 counselors ganging up on one of your staff
No
members.
ganging up.
We asked
happy
Ken
for
about
the
this.
help.
He was fine.
Okay.
He's happy for the
I
help.
just want to check with the boss.
I
on-
check with him too.
Okay, I hear you. Nice to confirm. So, does anybody have a heartache if Councilor Hinton and spend time with, okay?
Nobody asked me if I
Sir
wanted
Coos
to.
is
Yeah, I know, it always left out.
Might
I
be
hear
reason
you.
for that.
Start our own threesome and go meet.
Okay.
Yeah, all right.
All right, any other, since we're not, it really did come for a
You know,
late night, didn't it?
no, I didn't realize it was going to be so late. I just want to ask, we still didn't do appointments? And do we do appointments, like for the villages? I'd like to continue with
Appoint-
that.
Yeah, you'd stay on.
Just stay
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
okay,
I-
okay. I just thought I'd.
And that's, I guess I asked the question on the council president, and it's a 2-year term, so you're stuck for 2 years, Judy, just so you know. But, so, yeah. And again, if ever groups you are meeting with or on, you're tired of, want to change, just raise the issue, because we can make that kind of change. Oh, I don't even show you on it.
I have a,
Are you getting, oh, well,
yeah.
okay, yeah.
Sorry for that.
No, that's fine.
Mr. Mayor? Yes, sir.
Yeah, we're not.
We're not done yet?
No, because once you started with comments, I want to get all the comments out
Okay.
of the way.
Mine's quick.
You already had yours.
Okay.
Oh, I was just going to piggyback off what Ms. Hinton said about appointing maybe new people to some of our committees. I'm on the library board. That could probably use somebody
Different?
different, yeah.
So that would be, could you share with us as to your responsibilities of that? Because the library board is the only one that has a city councilor.
Okay. In my honest opinion, we're not needed there, to be completely honest. We don't vote. We go, we kind of sit and listen in. The times that I have shown up, I haven't been there all year due to work commitments. But every time I have been, it's just a breakdown of what the library's doing, their numbers, and then just a basic board meeting of, we have this coming up, and they kind of vote on it. The few times I've been there, I've never felt needed or asked questions.
So is anybody interested to level where it's a monthly, isn't it? Monthly?
It's monthly. It's usually on a Wednesday, 3:30 to 4:30 in the afternoon.
Library? You're not?
The reports are very thorough. I mean,
Yeah.
Christine
Yeah.
does a great
It's
job.
the weeklies and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
If I could, Mr. Appicello, this is the only committee of all our committees that somehow had a requirement of a city councilor.
I can look to see if it was dictated by statute, which for some reason I think it was, but, because I don't know why we would do that for one committee and not every other
Me
one.
too.
But I have this feeling it was part of the statute, so I'll look at
Can
it.
statutes be changed?
By the legislature.
We're not getting state money, are we, for libraries?
I will look at it and let you know.
Okay, because that might answer that.
Let me, I don't mind going when I
Go.
know I'm going to be useful and I'm needed. But
Oh, you don't like just going to meetings to go to
Yeah,
meetings?
sometimes, but.
And
Judy?
the other one is the Sustainability Waste Committee. The alternate, I found out, is Debbie Bridges, Financial Director, and then behind her is Scott to replace me, which seems odd because I'm on this committee where there's a representative from each city, and none of their alternates are department directors, and it includes the 3 haulers. So maybe we need to look at, because I know one of you guys would love to be on this committee if I'm not there.
Why don't we, are there other ones, just get that list of primary and alternate on those committees and just see if any of them need to be cleaned up at some point. If, Kathy, if you could do that, would be, yeah, okay. Diane, do you have anything? It's been a long time.
I
You were-
don't.
You were gone in December, right? Yeah, sunshine.
But I watched you all.
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
Mark? Okay.
Can I-
Now I'll take the wording for.
Okay, so
executive.
the city council will now meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192-662E, real property transactions, and 2H, legal counsel, potential litigation, which allows the city council to meet in executive session to discuss helping hands and associated property, and I can't remember the name of the person we're buying that property from, but
Peters.
the Petersons, or
Oh, it's the Peters family.
Trust,
The
right?
Peters Trust.
And also to discuss the threatened litigation we had this evening. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience will be asked to leave. We'll do it down the hall. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report or otherwise disclose any of the deliberations or anything said about the subjects during executive session, except to state the general subject of the session. As previously announced, no decision may be made in executive session. At the end of executive session, we will return to open session and welcome the audience back to the room.
So we'll recess to executive session. Approximately half an hour?
Tops.
Tops. Okay.
Mics are off.
still in question phase.
Mic is on.
On record?
So we're back in session, 9:49. It's the city council meeting of January 13th. We've completed our agenda, and any actions to be taken from executive session? None? All right. And we've already done announcements, so we stand adjourned.
Got 10 minutes before the lights are out.